we're just starting the
Morning,
webcast.
Chair.
Welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee this Wednesday, 24th of November 2021. If we go to agenda item number 1, which is apologies. Are we any apologies? No. Smashing. Moving on to declarations of interest. Is there any declarations of interest? Yeah, Gary?
Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it's a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the chamber for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate and any vote. If a personal or personal and prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available online.
Thank you, Gary. Is there any declarations? No. Okay. Moving on then to agenda item number 3.
Barry?
Sorry?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Clued Pensions, but I thought I'd bring it up, but I'm still unsure, but I thought I'd mention it because it's Clued Pensions is mentioned in the paperwork today. Okay.
Yes, it's fine to declare a personal interest that you're a member of the pension fund because it does form part of the paper regarding the accounts, but I don't think it's not related to your pension in particular, and it's just a statement of account. It's not a decision about anything to do with the pension.
No. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay. Moving on then to agenda item number 3, urgent matters. Notes of items which, in the opinion of the chair, should be considered at the meeting a matter of urgency pursuant to section 100B of the Local Government Act 1972. I've had nothing put in front of me. Moving on then to agenda item number 4, which are the minutes. A copy of the minutes on pages 7 to 16. I'll go page for page first of all and come back for any matters arising. Page 7. Page 8, page 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. Is there any matters arising from the minutes? No? Do I have a proposer for the minutes? Thank you, Rhys, and seconder, Ellie Chard. Thanks very much. Moving on then to agenda item number 5 is Care Inspectorate Wales Assurance Check 2021. To receive a report on the findings of the Care Inspectorate Wales Assurance Check of Denbighshire County Council undertaken the 28th of June to the 2nd of July. I think that's Nicola, is it Nicola?
Yes, Borodar Chair. Can I also introduce Sian Roberts from Care Inspectorate Wales? She's joined committee this morning. The letter is obviously a CIW letter, which I will speak to. But if it's okay with you, Chair, Sian may want to say a few words. Sian is our lead inspector, and we have an excellent working relationship. And Sian oversees children's and adult social care issues for Denbighshire. Diolch.
Welcome, Sian. Who's going to take the report, Nicola? Is it yourself or Sian?
I can talk through. Sian, can you hear us okay? Did you want to say anything to start or maybe come in later? I can see Sian on the screen, but I don't know that she's hearing us perfectly. Okay. I will do then. I was also expecting the lead member, Bobby. I did speak to her this morning. I know she was intending on joining, so she must be having some technical difficulties. So, in fact, my phone's just buzzed now. It was Bobby. Oh, Sian, are you able to? We can't hear you, Sian. Maybe turn your camera off.
There is a bit of a break from what when you're. Can you hear me?
Yes.
If you turn your camera off, Sian, it might work a bit better.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's better, Sian.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, coming through okay now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Sian.
Is it coming through okay?
Yeah, it's coming through okay now. No, we can't hear you, Sian.
You know whether Nicola wants to give an overview, or did you want me to give an overview first of all, Nicola?
I'm happy to give an overview if that's okay, Sian, and then you can add any additional comments if you feel I've missed anything pertinent. Is that okay? And our lead member is here now.
Hi, sorry I was a bit late.
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me now?
Yes, although you're breaking up. Chair, if okay, then I'll do an introduction, and Sian and the lead member Bobby can contribute after that, or potentially answer any questions. Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, thanks, Nicola.
Okay, I've turned my camera off to hopefully improve the connection. So so the committee today is presented with an annual assurance check letter from Care Inspectorate Wales. Obviously, with COVID, our normal arrangements for oversight and scrutiny by our regulatory body was slightly altered. And I think it's important that the committee note that during COVID, many of our CIW colleagues actually went onto the front line and went back into practice and supported health and social care delivery during the pandemic. So I would like to offer my personal thanks to our CIW colleagues for that. And I know that's something that has been recognised and valued across all Wales for that work. But obviously, as things started to change and vaccination rollout happened, CIW felt, rightly so, that it was important that they undertook some assurance check work to assure not only themselves as regulators, but us as their customers, I suppose, that things were being delivered appropriately and safely. So this assurance check letter is a summary of the findings of that check, which took place quite some months ago now. I'd like to point out to the committee a number of positives within the assurance check letter. It makes reference to the voice of carers being heard by our practitioners, that during COVID, we tried many creative opportunities to engage with people. And despite the pressures, we continue to focus on what matters for our citizens. They acknowledged that despite the pressures, we maintained a positive culture and we adapted our practice to those challenges. Of particular importance was the recognition of a positive culture and improvements within adult safeguarding. And many of you will know when I've presented our annual reports from CIW in the past, that has been an area of concern. And we also know that culture is the one that takes the longest to change. But now that is an acknowledgement that that culture has changed and there are significant improvements within our adult safeguarding service. There's also a recognition of our positive work with looked after children and foster carers, and also mention of our excellent therapeutic team. There's a recognition of the benefits of our joint education and children's services department, and also an acknowledgement of the positive relationships that we have with our providers and how COVID has increased our communication and actually improved our relationship with those providers. The letter recognises how we've continued to build community capacity and really started to harness and explore volunteering opportunities. And it also identifies that managers act decisively when required. However, the letter does acknowledge some areas where we as a department need to improve, so that some aspects of our recording we need to strengthen. Issues around professional curiosity and ensuring that we don't always just take what we see at face value, that we ask more questions that actually draw out some of the information that we need to know. A recognition that we have some excellent practice, but in areas we need to improve the consistency of practice. And that was mentioned around children's services. It's something that Rhiannon and I were aware of before CIW undertook this assurance check and was already work in progress and continues to be work in progress now. During COVID, our audits were temporarily halted, but they have now been reinstated. The report acknowledges the challenges in recruitment, and members will be familiar with this issue. It's something that myself, Phil and Rhiannon have referenced over the last few months. And that continues to be a particular challenge around domiciliary care, and particularly in the south of the county with the additional complexity of rurality. The letter does recognise the external pressures are creating challenges. There are diminished resources and complex demand. But it does recognise that whilst our staff are tired, exhausted and drained, they do feel supported. And the bit I would like to highlight to committee the most is the letter says that our staff are a credit to themselves, but also to us as the local authority. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Nicola. Bobby, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I think Nicola has covered it pretty well, but you know, obviously COVID has thrown some of our normal everyday arrangements into sort of not quite as rigid as perhaps it normally is. But I think what we have done well is highlighted within this report, and I would like to thank the Care Inspectorate for the report and for the care they've taken in looking into Denbighshire as an individual council. I think I agree wholeheartedly that we have done a lot to help in terms of listening to carers, to the voice of carers. And we have seen for the first time technology come into its own you know, is something that a lot of people have resisted, including, I have to say in brackets here, you know, I've resisted it at times myself also, and certainly have resisted the virtual link-ups and staring at a screen instead of being with people face to face. I've found extremely hard. So I empathised with carers who were feeling a bit, you know, unnerved by the new world that they were suddenly put into. Although I have to say that the good old-fashioned phone calls that many of us took on our shoulders during the pandemic itself, phoning quite a few people. I can't remember how many, but hundreds of people, and we all took a batch, as it were. And those phone calls were so welcomed. You know, just an old-fashioned landline, and people really looked forward to hearing from you. And I know the people making the phone calls got as much out of it as the people they were phoning. So I think that was a very simple thing that helped us through. Yeah, I can understand what you're saying about the recording and the not always recording the decision making, and a certain amount of inconsistencies. But you know, I'm not making excuses. I mean, I'm sure all councils will say the same. We have got have had and continue to have severe recruitment challenges, which we're trying to combat constantly. But we have worked well in partnership during these difficult times. I'd like to highlight the work the CRTs have done, working together with HELP and helping to keep the show on the road in simple layman's terms. So I think Nicola has covered all the salient points. It's just a few extras from me, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Bobby. Sian, did you want to come in?
I'm hoping you can hear me now.
Yes, Sian, coming across.
Yes. Well, I think Nicola's given a fair, you know, and a true reflection of the letter that we issued, published recently. You know, we need to remember the context of those assurance checks, you know, at a time where local authorities across Wales were under significant challenges. So the methodology was amended to take into account of, you know, those challenges that the local authorities were under. Nicola has rightly pointed out a number of positives that we identified, as well as some areas to be strengthened, developed. And there is an action plan, as Nicola rightly said, you know, and they were aware and were working on those issues highlighted before we visited.
Thank you, Sian. I have got a couple of members with questions. Just before that, on behalf of this committee, we'd like to say to the CRT staff who did step into the breach during this COVID-19, I think the whole committee, you know, commends them for that type of work. So if we could put that in the minutes. Martin, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, when I went through this report, it is quite a positive report in many ways. And I think that the key wording was, you know, the social services staff are tired, but they are a credit to the authority for the challenge that they undertook and the services they provided during very difficult times. So, you know, I'm pleased that you've actually put that to be noted in the minutes. Just a couple of things, though. Out of this, one of the things I noticed, one of the comments was that we need to perhaps grow our own staff into these roles. I wonder if somebody could just elaborate a little bit more on that, especially because I'm a little concerned these days that in growing our own, we've obviously got to have good training in place, and often the training is actually when you're doing the job with colleagues, and often when you're working in an office, you gain that experience from the people who are sitting around you. Working remotely has, you know, created a barrier there, I think, in many ways. So just like a comment on that. What are we doing to go out and recruit staff? Are we talking to our sixth formers in careers conventions and things like that to see whether there are youngsters out there who would like to see a career of some sort in social care? So that's another point I would just like to make. And then I think that probably covers what I've got down here. I noticed, obviously, there was a positive comment, that actually many of our staff who are out and about on the road found that the fact that they weren't travelling as often gave them more time to spend with their clients on the telephone, which obviously was the positive side of that. But I also noticed that a lot of people, certainly carers and others, they didn't have the technology for Zoom meetings, which would be useful, and how we get over that. So there we are, Mr. Chairman. I think there's just a couple of questions there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Martin. Did you want to come back?
Could I just come back on just part of that question, Martin, on the recruitment side of things? Yes, we are doing our best to recruit. And in fact, we had a recruitment day yesterday in Denbigh, trying to do anything we can, whether it be internal or external, to get staff. But this is not just a Denbighshire problem, this is right across Wales. And I think the government are well aware of the problem. In many ways, it gives me a chance to say that social care, as much as we've just been giving our staff accolades and our staff are fantastic, social care is not on a level playing field with NHS in terms of pay and conditions. And I think it is still not regarded in terms of a career as high as say working as in the NHS is regarded. So in terms of status, in terms of pay, in terms of conditions, social care is still undervalued. And I don't think that helps us to make an overnight solution, if you like, to the problem. I know in the pipeline, we've got the real living wage coming down the line. And I know from a network meeting I had the other day, last week, in fact, with fellow cabinet members and WLGA and ministers across Wales, I know that some councils are actually charging more, are paying, should I say, not charging, paying more to their staff, despite budget challenges, because it's a desperate attempt to try and get people into the profession. So that's something I think that's being handled at government level, in terms of paying conditions and status and trying to move us up a notch. And we're all doing our best to try and achieve that. And I hope, listening to what I was listening to last week with the ministers involved with the WLGA, that we are getting close to that point where we are able to pay staff at what you might call a decent living wage for what is the most essential job. Can anybody think of a more essential job? In terms of academic skills, possibly not. But in terms of the skills needed to look after people, all their wants and needs in terms of social care, I cannot think of any more sort of worthy job, worthy of better pay and better conditions. So yes, we're trying here in Denbighshire in our own way to recruit, and we're doing everything we can. But I think at a higher level down the line, I think things will improve. I think sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Bobby. Nicola, did you want to come in?
Yes, so thank you, Martin, for your questions, really good questions. In terms of the Grow Your Own, it's in reference to professional roles, and that's around our professional social work and occupational therapist roles in particular. That is something we are looking at, and we are working in partnership with Glyndŵr University. And it is something that we are looking to support a number of placements for individuals who demonstrate the right skills and also want to embark on that professional qualification course. However, it does present us with some challenges. We do have a shortage, as do all local authorities at the moment, within our professionally qualified roles as well, which is a challenge. But the difficulty is not only do we have to release staff from roles that we're struggling to recruit to as well, we then also have to have practice teachers that can receive a student on placement, and that takes them away from some of their practice work as well. So whilst there are benefits to us growing our own and supporting individuals through that professional qualification route, it doesn't come without its other challenges. But that is something we are actively exploring at the moment, and I do expect that we will be putting forward a number of individuals, certainly for the social work degree course at Glasgow University. In terms of recruitment, absolutely. We work with colleges, with sixth forms. I know from talking to one of the college principals a few years ago, he was telling me that their most that the course that they have most signed up to is the health and social care courses, but yet those are the courses that then lead on to the fewest people following into that as a career. And why is that? And that is something that not only Denbighshire struggles with, but regionally and across Wales is something, and we're working very closely at a local level with our work in Denbighshire and our partners within further education. We're also working regionally. We have the Regional Workforce Board, and nationally with Social Care Wales and the We Care Wales campaign. So there's lots going on, and it is something, but it does come back to the issue that Bobby raised. We have to raise the profile of social care as being a professional career, as being something as high in esteem as somebody who may work in the NHS. In terms of technology, it was an issue, but actually what we were able to do was utilise some of the Welsh Government hardship grant monies to actually purchase some technology. So at the very start of the pandemic, we purchased a number of iPads, which we were able to put into some of our supported living schemes and into our extra care, so that individuals were able to maintain contact. And likewise, certainly for a number of our children and families who didn't have technology, we were able to utilise monies to be able to provide them with technology to enable them to communicate not only with us but also with friends and family. So that is something that we did. I hope that answers your questions, Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicola. That's quite comprehensive. As you say, I think it's this business of trying to up the ante here and make people aware that it is a worthwhile career and can be extremely rewarding when you talk to staff in social services. But at the moment, obviously, they're all under a great deal of pressure, and we all know that one of the root causes that is COVID and everything else that goes along with that, sadly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Nicola. Rhys.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As some of you will know, I have first-hand experience of work in third.
Rhys, you're breaking up badly. Could you turn your video off?
And so I welcome this report, and I can add my my voice as well to the recognition and the praise for those individuals working in children's services. I'm pleased to see the report that there are so many positive comments there. There's mention of positive culture and all sorts of other really good comments. But if we can come back to the report just for a moment, there are also some issues, especially I've picked up on page 25, and page 26 of the report that are slightly concerning. We hear about some inconsistencies of practice. We learn that skills must be developed and refreshed quickly. We surely must have concerns about some of our young people being in bed and breakfast accommodation. But rather than sounding too negative about it, the positive thing about all of those comments is that there is recognition of this amongst the staff of children's services. And it's not a matter that they're being swept under the carpet or ignored. The report comes out time and time again showing that there is recognition of these weaknesses. And I think that is the benefit of this report and the audit report, is that we can see that our staff and senior management are aware of these things. So it doesn't concern me for that reason, because of that word recognition that comes up. I will have more to say about this, because I think when we come to the recommendations eventually, I think there may be things that we need to take out of there. So that's not a question, but it's simply just stating the situation, that it's been a very, very difficult situation. I've been aware of this with the care of children in the fostering service and so on. So I've been fully aware of this, and I have been very, very impressed at the responses of our staff and our social workers. So thank you very much for the report. Thank you, Nicola. Diolch yn fawr, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys. Did you want to add anything, Nicola?
Just to thank Rhys for his continued support and the work that he does for our fostering panel. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Nicola. Ellie?
Just a couple of notes I've written there. Page 4, and thank you again for this report. I was pleased to read about the staff and the well-being, Nicola. Page 4, and that was really good. And I felt right through the COVID, we were supporting our staff. So I want that noted. And then page 5, we talk about referrals being submitted and then resubmitted before referrals were accepted. And I'm glad that there's chasing up on that, because, you know, I'm aware of things being left in the what I call the waiting basket on the desk. But I was pleased to know that staff put the referrals in and they resubmit them again just to make sure they get accepted. So I think it was good to know. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you.
Can I come back on that, Chair? Yeah. Thank you, Ellie, and the recognition around our staff feeling supported. You know, whilst obviously myself, Phil, and Rianne we're involved in that, it's very much a corporate approach, how we support our staff, HR, occupational health, workforce development, or all of that. So it very much a corporate-wide approach to ensuring our staff were supported. Also, some additional national resources through Social Care Wales, through Welsh Government, and through the Association of Social Workers Cymru. So, you know, lots of people wrapping round and providing support when needed. I do have to say though, Ellie, unfortunately, you've slightly misinterpreted that area of improvement. What's happened is there have been a few referrals that were made. They didn't progress. And then the person who originally made the referral has had to re-refer in again, or somebody else has referred in again. So it's not because our staff have gone back out and asked more questions. And I think what we're aware of, and Sian said, you know, we were aware of this, is that first initial information, if it didn't quite reach the threshold, There wasn't
Yeah.
that professional curiosity to say, well, is there a bit more behind this? So we
Yeah.
took the referral at face value, didn't necessarily progress it. Things have escalated, it's come back in. So that's because we weren't necessarily thorough enough at the first referral. So it isn't that we've actually gone back out and chased it. So I have to
No.
admit, you know, that is an area we need
Yeah.
to improve. We recognise that, and that is something that we're doing. And that reference to the fact that our audits were stopped during COVID because of the pressures. Now that those audits have recommenced, that's something, again, that's a safety net for us to make sure that at that first referral, that we are making sure we're really looking at the information in detail.
Good. So thank you.
What I would
Nicola.
say is, and it's not making excuses, but when the staff are receiving as many referrals as they do, and they are short-staffed as they are,
Yeah.
if you get one that comes through the door and it doesn't look as if it's serious, it's almost a relief to be able to put that to one side and not have to progress it. But that's, you know, that's something for us as a service and as a management team.
Yeah.
We've got to provide support to staff to actually say, well, no, we need to look at this in more detail.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola, for clearing that up. I see no more hands. So moving to the recommendation, and I know, Rhys, you said you wanted to come back on this, that the committee considers the CIW assurance check, the summary of findings and priorities for improvement, and consider whether any further scrutiny is required. Rhys?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair. I was going to come back to the last part of that recommendation and consider whether any further scrutiny is required. Now, I'm not sure when the next report on children's services would be, but when I read the report, it talks about the need for things to be done quickly and an immediate improvement. So I don't know whether in 6 months' time we should have a report back on this. Over to Nicola, I think.
Lisa, maybe you could help with that.
Yeah, we have got an audit of children's services in the plan. It was originally going to be of the adoption service, but there are some matters involved with that regional arrangements, which means it's unlikely to go ahead. So we are looking and discussing with Rhiann what the review will cover, and it will be of looked after children in some respects. So we can pick on some of those elements as part of our audit and bring a report back during this financial year. That's something that we were going to meet with Rhiann and Nicola in January to agree the scope of that review. So that's something that we can bring back here.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to put any additional pressures on a new head of service, but I just thought it might be good to have some sort of interim report. That's just my view. I don't know what other panel members think. Thank you.
Chair, if I can come in, as part of CIW's role, where they highlight any areas for improvement, then they do have follow-up reviews. And that is something that CIW are working with Rhiann on, and therefore, you know, there will be some further information that I can share with committee in a future meeting in terms of, you know, CIW coming back, looking at those issues again in a bit more detail. Have we made the improvements they would have expected us to make in the time frame? So yeah, absolutely happy to come back in the future and share with you CIW's further information reports and our work in progress.
Thank you, Nicola. Okay with that, Rhys?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you, Nicola. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking along similar lines. Presumably there'll be some sort of action plan for these priorities for improvement. And if we could get a progress report on that at the appropriate time, as Nicola's just suggested, that would be fine. So I would support that approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, there is an action plan, Paul.
Okay,
Thank
members.
you, that's fine.
Thank you, Paul. So we've got that as part of the recommendation that there will be a follow-up from CIW, and Nicola will bring a report back to us. Okay, before we move on, I'd just like to thank Sian Roberts for being with us today, and thank you for the report, Sian.
Okay, thank you very much, and diolch. So I will leave the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sian. Moving on then, members, to agenda item 6. The Corporate Risk Register Review, September 2021, pages 29 to 122. To receive a report on the September review of the Corporate Risk Register. I think, is it Yolo coming in first or Emma?
It's moving in first. I'm going to do Yolo for the detail of it, Chair, if that's okay.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm just going to give a very quick overview as an introduction, and then, as I say, hand over to Yolo, who can take you through some of the detail. Hopefully by now you'll be familiar with the format of this report, and you're aware that the corporate risk register is reviewed on a regular basis by both CET and SLT and by Cabinet. And following that, it comes to governance and audit and performance scrutiny as well. So there's quite a good coverage in terms of where we actually look at it. I'm just going to focus on the summary, essentially, which is section 4.7 to your in the main report, because this time around there have been a number of changes, whether to the scoring, to the wording of risks. And there are also 2 new risks which have been included, obviously, for the first time. So I'll very quickly whistle through the summary to give you a flavour, and then I'll hand over to Yolo to take you through the detail of some of the reasoning behind it. So the first couple there, risk 18 and risk 35. Essentially, risk 35 is being retired and merged together with risk 18. Which is about project benefits not being fully realized. However, as you will see, there was an increase in the likelihood score from a D2 to a C2 as a result of that. Risk 30, which is that about senior leadership capacity and skills, has increased in likelihood from a D3 to a C3. 34, the risk of demand for specialist care cannot be met locally, again, has increased from a C2 to an A2. 36, which is about the Brexit risk, has been downgraded from a B2 to a C2. Risk 37, as you'll see there, the wording has been changed to focus it primarily and more explicitly on the importance of efforts to reduce inequality and deprivation. 43, we don't have sufficient funding or resources to meet statutory obligations under the ALN and Educational Tribunal Acts, has increased in terms of its impact score from a D3 to a D2. Risk 44, which is about ash dieback, representing a risk to life primarily, not the actual risk of it occurring, because we know that's a certainty essentially, has reduced in likelihood from an A2 to a B2. And then finally, in terms of the existing risks, number 45, about our inability perhaps to deliver on the agendas of councils and external organisations. Again, that's been focused primarily to focus in on the climate change and carbon zero agenda. And then finally, the two new risks there which are proposed. Number 47 is one over the new corporate joint committee, which obviously are now being established. And whatever our thoughts on them, they're here to stay. We think initially in terms of that, we're putting a residual risk score in of a D3 score. And the final one fits in with perhaps might be a theme on today's agenda in many respects, about recruitment and retention, which is, as I say, a new risk that we've escalated to the corporate register with a residual risk score of B3. And then my final quick comment before I hand over to Yolo for the detail is on the, I've just noticed the numbering error on the other 4.7, which should be 4.8, in terms of risk appetite. You'll be aware that we added this in probably a couple of years ago now. Actually, time flies, and the risk owners asked to consider all impacts and determine that to see whether the risk correlates with our risk appetite. And you'll see that in a number of areas, there's continued to be a difference between the risk score and the risk appetite score. And I think Yolo will probably give you a bit more detail on that in a moment. So as a general introduction, that's all I wanted to say, Chair. So I'll now hand over to Yolo to go through some of the bit more the detail and the background to it.
Thank you, Julian. Yeah, over to you, Yolo.
Thank you, Julian. Good morning, everyone. I can scarcely believe it's been a year since I last brought this report to corporate governance. Just to remind members, it is brought to this committee on an annual basis so that you can be assured that our corporate risk processes are being robustly applied. I should also stress that it is going to performance scrutiny tomorrow to have the risks scrutinized. So I just want to put that out there. The main thing I wanted to say about this particular review is that it follows the internal audit review of corporate risk. So again, I wanted to offer assurance that the actions that arose from that internal audit review have been considered here. You will see within the detail of the register that there are some enhancements where, for example, we now include direction of travel. So that is, where do we want this risk to be in 1 month, 2 months, a year hence? So there's the risk owners have offered a kind of direction of travel for how we want the risks to progress, hopefully not getting any worse. We've also started in earnest to consider performance measures to help assess how well risks are improving. I would say this is still in its early stages. Setting that direction of travel has certainly helped, but during the next review, we want to have a more in-depth conversation with risk owners around performance measures. So that's in the pipeline. The other thing we've considered in this review is a thorough kind of look at risk appetite. We want to make sure that there is a consistent understanding of risk of appetite, and we've tried to delve in on a number of risks where the gap was particularly large, just so that we could be confident that the controls that were identified were doing what they claim to be doing. So another enhancement that we've made is that we've tried to identify primary controls, but then ancillary controls as well, things that might have a contribution but might not have an overall effect. So in the main, that is the risk register. Julian's already summarised all the changes. It's also, of course, been shook up to reflect changes in our SLT structure. Obviously, Graham as our new chief exec, so he is now the responsible owner for a number of risks, and some other risks have been moved to more appropriate heads of service as well. Otherwise, I'm happy to open it up to questions from members.
Thank you, Yolo. It's good to hear that it is going to performance scrutiny tomorrow. Questions from the floor. Martin.
Thanks, Chair. As you say, this is quite a comprehensive report, and there are quite a few improvements, additions, etc., which, on the whole, I think, having read through them, I can see why they're there, makes logic. Just a couple of observations. Risk 11, we now include cyber attack in brackets under that section. Whenever you listen to the news these days, it's all about cyber attacks, and I'm just wondering whether we should push that up the system, and perhaps it should have its own risk level. Just as I say, just a point there of observation. 13, we're talking there about obviously companies, contracts, outsourced items, things like that. And yes, that's imperative that we have controls in place there. And quite, I know we audit our own leisure services limited, but obviously we have other contracts with people like Civica and things like that. So it's important that we're on top of all of that. And I know we've had a recent report there in the press that they're looking to change direction. So I'm assuming we're making improvements or getting ready for that change in direction. Fortunately, as a council, we haven't invested in sort of gas and electric supplies and things like that. And where a large number of local authorities, and certainly across the UK, are now going bankrupt because they've payrolled those sort of investments, so-called investments. So I don't think we're as a risk as many others are, but it's good to see that one. And you will expect me to talk about, because there's a lot of important risk areas here, but you'll expect me to talk about risk 44, which is ash dieback, being in the ward which probably has the most ash trees in the county. And I must admit these days, guys, I don't go out when there's a gale, because I look at all the ash trees that are dying on the B5430 and wonder when they're all going to come down in the winter gales. So I'm planning on staying in a lot during the winter months this year, but it is a big issue.
Oh no, it's okay.
Oh, sorry. Right, I don't know who that was. It wasn't me, but guys, just to say that I know the county is undertaking a report on ash dieback. Are we any nearer to having that report produced? I know guys have been out assessing the trees in my ward, and and just to put it in perspective, I know that at Loggerheads Country Park we've already identified 300 ash trees in the park alone that have ash dieback. I appreciate that this risk is more to do with the fact that they're on trees on roadsides, could fall down and ultimately kill somebody. But we did have a case with the National Trust where a tree fell on a child and killed a child in a park. And of course, so 300 ash trees in Loggerheads is also just a little bit worrying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Did you want to come back, Yolo? Okay, Tony.
Can I come back to Martin?
Oh. Yeah, go on, Yolo. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. So with regards to risk 11 and the cyber attack, I should say there that even though a cyber attack would be an event that we would have to respond to, the risk here is concerned with our inability to respond. So that is the event that we're focused on here. So for that part, I'm satisfied that the risk is still relevant. The ash dieback, yes, you will have a report, I believe, by March 2022.
Thank you, Yolo. Okay,
Chair,
Martin.
Chair, if I can just interject on one of the points that Martin raised, or strictly speaking, not on this report, I'll pick it up now anyway. The comment about Civica. Yes, you're quite correct, Martin. As you know, we've had a long-standing arrangement with Civica to deliver our revenues and benefits service, which has worked exceptionally well. And for both sides, I should add, but unfortunately they have taken a commercial decision at international board level, whatever it is, as they are an international company, that they're not going to proceed with those type of partnerships going forward. There's nothing specific to us. It's a perfectly very well functioning role from both sides. So we are looking at all of our potential alternatives. We put a project team together to deal with that, and there'll be an initial report coming back in the new year sometime to Cabinet with some initial ideas on that one.
Thank you on that, Julian. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to really just go back to the reason for making the report, and are we satisfied with the process of managing risk within the council? And I just wanted to make 3 points. That at 4.7, many of the risks have increased, which I would expect, because the world is a riskier place now. New risks have been identified and included. That's fine. And then there's a reference to risk appetite and those risks which may be significantly different, and a focus and justification on why that is. So I'm personally satisfied that the process of managing risk is being carried out properly at this present time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Ellie?
In reply to Martin's ashback, the trees, my daughter works in Lincolnshire with the National Trust. They've got loads of trees in their park, and every time there's a bad wind forecasted, basically they close the grounds. So, but I'm just wondering, does Loggerheads do that? I don't know, but I thought I'd mention it. And then I've got something else to say as well. Risk 16, the welfare reform, the universal credit. So I suppose, Julian, that goes to Civica, or does it go to Talking Points? Or because I am worried about people losing this £20 a week and all that, and all our residents. So that's something I'm concerned about. Okay.
Really? Julian?
Yeah, I can't remember which committee we bring regular. I think it's performance scrutiny, actually.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah, we bring regular reports on the impact of welfare reform and universal credit uptake and things like that. I'm not sure when we're next scheduled to come on that, but it is something that we report back pretty regularly.
Julian, it's tomorrow, performance, okay?
Yeah, but there's nothing specific about universal credit is what on tomorrow's agenda.
Okay,
Thanks, Ellie. We've got Tony.
Yes, thanks, Chair. First of all, my apologies. I lost about 7 or 8 minutes because my computer screen just went off and I had to come back in. And when Martin was speaking, and I apologise, Martin, the host just let me in, and so I think he heard a sound and wondered what it was. So my apologies for that. But one of the areas that I think a lot of people have got concerns about is this this staffing retention risks, challenges, and obviously I know there are a lot of challenges in recruiting the right staff. We've already sort of touched on that. But when we put together the risks, do we consider, you know, where our more mature staff are? Say the staff in the last 5 years of their working life, because you know that could have a huge impact if we're struggling, you know, over the next few years to recruit the right people, and we have quite a few people who are on the verge of retirement. So I just wondered if that was included in the risk assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Chair, can I come in on that one, please?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's actually quite an opposite point at the moment, because literally as we speak, HR are just commencing on a workforce planning piece of work, initially with each individual service, to go through exactly what we're talking about: age profiles, any specific service areas where they are difficult areas to recruit and retain staff, such as we talked about earlier. We normally carry this out on a pretty regular basis. Unfortunately, this was one of the other, yet another thing that was, we weren't able to carry out last year due to COVID. But we're now doing from now, and each of those individual service plans, which will have an action plan detailed to them, and they will also then escalate into, if there are any thematic issues, into an overall Denbighshire workforce planning action plan as well, which we hope to have completed, early part of next year, I would think, all things being equal. So yes, all that sort of data is being collated in individual services, literally as we speak.
Thank you, Julian. Yolo, I see you hand up. Did you want to come on that?
I was just going to add that this specific risk around recruitment and retention was written following a special SLT workshop with HR as well. So, and it does cover more than just recruitment and retention in the obvious places. We're also talking about specialist skill jobs here, which perhaps anecdotally you might say are largely occupied by more senior members of staff.
Thank you, Yolo. You okay, Tony, with that? Going on to Gwyneth.
Chair, could I just add something to that?
Certainly, Nicola. Yeah.
Diolch. I just think it's important that the committee acknowledges and understands that I think COVID has brought many challenges and opportunities, but one of the things that the change of working and working practices has done is actually individuals across all different work elements of the workforce have had an opportunity, I suppose, to reevaluate their lives and their home lives, their working lives. And actually what we're seeing, and it's not unique to Denbighshire, it's happening across all different sectors of employment, not just local government. Some people are choosing to take early retirement. Some people are choosing to change careers. Obviously, working remotely opens up other opportunities for individuals who perhaps wouldn't apply for jobs because it might mean either moving home or additional travel. And now, because of technology, those opportunities are open up to them. So it's a multifaceted issue, but it's something that, as Yolo mentioned, SLT were very aware of, and we were looking at in real detail, but felt it was a corporate risk. Clearly, there are pockets of pressures within certain categories of workforce, but it is something I think across the board we are very conscious of. And just picking up on Tony's other point, individual services should have it within their business continuity plans, very clear understanding of how they will continue to deliver services when people do plan to retire. So those plans should already be in place within each service anyway. But what we do know is that COVID in the last 18 months has exacerbated some of that situation. Diolch, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Gwyneth.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Mr Cadeirydd. gai jyst ofyn ynglyn â'r Brexit, da chi wedi dod iolo ar risg i lawr, ond i dyle ni ail edrych ar hwn oherwydd y gofalu yn ein cartrefi henoed fel enghraifft ac yn oherwydd Brexit mae yna ddiffyg staff i ddod. Dyna un o'r pethau, a hefyd efo'r loriau yn cael ei gyrru. Does a ddim ddigon o gyrwyr loriau mawr. Dyna un o'r pethau. Ac hefyd o dan diversity, ydy hwn yn risg pan dyn ni'n edrych ar cynrychiolaeth gan gwahanol bobl yn y gymdeithas. Ydy hwn yn risg i ni? Diolch.
Iolo, do you want to come back on Gwyneth's questions?
I was anticipating that someone was going to ask why the Brexit one had been downgraded. So just to set a little context behind this one, we were obviously doing this review back in September when things hadn't quite yet got as exciting as they are now. So I think the Brexit risk does, it is a snapshot in time at the moment. I think it was reflective of certainly where we were in September when we were updating the register. But on reflection, I think our scoring is accurate because we're now needing to differentiate between what is an issue that we are actively dealing with and what is a risk, an event that will occur in the future. And this register deals with events that will occur in the future. There are, however, Brexit is interwoven now throughout all these risks. So in terms of the DFIG staff in the care homes, we have obviously the recruitment and retention risk that we've just discussed. That one is actively looking at have we got the right staff in the right place for the right time. HGV drivers, that's now a risk to supply chains. So that one is dealt with elsewhere. And then the question around diversity in our organisation is an interesting one, Gwyneth. I would look to Nicola perhaps, but I don't suspect that there is a risk there because it hasn't changed how the council recruit individuals from our community. So I'm less certain that there's a risk there. If there is, it's certainly perhaps not a corporate risk, it might be a service risk. So that's certainly something we can consider as we go forward into the next review. And I would say as well, we do at the moment have a separate Brexit risk register, but as I've just said, it's mostly full of issues now. So there's a piece of work that I want to do between now and the next review is to dismember the Brexit risk register and make sure that we have fully taken account of issues of risks that are still risks and are not issues. There's one in my mind particularly concerning the TRACK project, which is an EU fund project that ends in September 2022. It's a very important project that helps engage disengaged young people in education, and that is a big risk to the authority. I know it's something that SLT are actively looking at the moment. So between now and the next review in February, we will be having discussions with Geraint Davis and Liz Grieve, who also receives European funding, to make sure that the next iteration of the register reflects TRACK and any other projects that might suffer.
Thanks, Iolo. You okay, Gwyneth? Thank you. Rhys?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Diolch Iolo, thank you Iolo for that presentation. I shall keep my 2 pages of notes about individual matters for tomorrow, when I think I'll be seeing Ellie again, and I think and Martin as well. So so thank you for that. You've even given me a few extra things to add to my list. I think the levelling down fund might possibly crop up if you want to think about that before then. But there we are. I just want to go back to what was said earlier by Paul. I think we're looking at, are we satisfied with the process of managing risk? And if we come back to the reason we're all here, I think I'm very satisfied with the process of managing risk, and I look forward to discussing all the minutiae in the meeting tomorrow. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys. I'm sure you're all looking forward to tomorrow's meeting. Any more questions, members? No. Moving on then to the recommendation that the corporate governance and audit are assured that the council's risk management process is being correctly applied. Are you happy with that, members? Yes, I'm sure you are, Nathan. Okay, thank you, Yolo.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Moving on then, members, it's quite a big agenda. We're just going to get to halfway through here. So moving on to approval of the Statement of Accounts 2020-21, to receive a report by the Head of Finance and Property on the Statement of Accounts and ensure that it complies with approved accounting standards. Pages 283 to 306. Julian, are you going to start with us?
I very briefly, Chair, am I going to start this? This is one where I hand over very quickly to Steve. Just to set the scene and remind members of where we are with regards to this. The draft Statement of Accounts went to this committee back in September and was available in line with the regulations for public inspection during the month of September. Would confirm that obviously it complies with the IFRS standards in the way that it has been compiled. Just a couple of things to note that this is the first year that we've had to complete group accounts rather than just our own Denbighshire accounts, because of we now have the Denbighshire Leisure accounts which need to be incorporated within ours. I'm very pleased to see that we have an unqualified audit opinion and certificate, and colleagues that will no doubt update with regards to that in a little while. As you know, this year the timetable was delayed due to COVID, and the cut-off date, as you'll see in the report, for approval of and signing off of the final accounts is the end of this month. So which is why we're here today. Just a further couple of issues just to flag up. Again, we flagged this up to you before, that because of the changes in time tabling, there will not be time to correct any misstatements that may have occurred, and they will be updated within next year's reports. But perhaps the key internal one is that because the staff have been working on the accounts for a longer period this year to be able to get everything delivered, that has had and will have a bit of a knock-on effect and impact on some of the other areas of work that they would otherwise have been doing over this period. So there is it doesn't come without some pain to the team. So I think as a general introduction, that's all I wanted to say. So I'll just hand over to Steve now for the detail. Thank you, Chair.
Steve.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Julian. Bore da pawb. Yeah, I'm not really going to go into a huge amount of detail in the actual the IC 260, which is the report with the items that have been found to have been misstatements. I'll let our colleagues in Audit Wales go through that. I think just on the process, obviously it's been probably the most stressful statement of accounts process, and I think Audit Wales would agree with that, and I appreciate how hard they've worked, and we've worked with them to get this over the line for this committee. What that has meant is that we have corrected a few misstatements, but we took a decision, well, but just before the last week in October, really, that if we were going to get this over the line, there was no chance that we could spend time correcting those misstatements as long as they were still below the materiality. So that materiality level, which is from memory, I think was about 3.7 million this year. So as long as if the cumulative impact of all those misstatements are below that, then that was the decision we took quite early on. And the main reason for that is the audit work just carried on, which is exactly what needed to happen, because Audit Wales need to be happy to be able to issue a statement. They need to have carried out all their work, and in order for them to do that, we need to obviously supply them with all the responses to queries. And I have to say, it just was not possible to do that and to do the corrections that we'd agreed with them as well, to get it over the line for this committee. So that's the reason for that. I mean, over the last couple of years, we've taken a decision sort of usually the first week in September that anything after that we wouldn't correct, again for the same reason. But by then, in any usual year, most of the audit work had been completed by that stage. In this case, we had to take that decision a little bit earlier, which meant there are more misstatements. I just want to mention also the point that Julian just touched upon around the impact on our work. Obviously, we're at the end of November, and I'm sure Audit Wales will want to touch on the impact on their work as well, some of their work that needs to be done. So authorization of grants, etc., has had to be delayed. But for us, it's really about preparing for next year. And I know I've committed to an update report, which I still will do for the next Governance and Audit Committee. So you've had statement of accounts reports every meeting since June, so you're very lucky. That report will try to summarise the work we've done to progress next year's timetable. But I have to say, at this stage, we haven't had time to spend any time on next year's timetable for close down, and that's just because we've only just finished the statement of accounts, and we really went up against the wire for the deadline for this meeting to get them here. So it is having a knock-on effect. Unfortunately, well, I'm sure Audit Wales, when they go through those misstatements, a lot of the issues are around the assets and the asset register that we have based on spreadsheets, etc. Now, unfortunately, it's very unlikely that we'll be able to make any huge improvements to that for next year, just because there is no time. Internal audit are coming in, doing their preparatory work for financial systems from next month. And we go straight into actually doing those initial work for the statement of accounts for next year. Importantly, we will be doing more work with DLL to make sure we're dovetailing there. We did manage to do the group accounts this year, so that's really pleasing. And I think those got a clean bill of health from Audit Wales, so our approach to them was cleared, which I think is really good for the first time that we've done it. I would also just highlight a bit of a risk going forward. So a key member of our staff is, and this hasn't obviously helped, has gone on flexible retirement. So there is capacity issues there because you go down to 3 days a week when you go on flexible retirement, and that we are currently looking to recruit early to a replacement, because we have 2 finance managers going in short succession. So we're hoping to recruit early for one of those posts. But we've struggled in the past recruiting qualified accountants and finance managers. So again, just on the theme of the meeting, really, we will report back to Governance and Audit Committee on that. But we're struggling for resources, which hasn't helped this year, and we've obviously got plans in place going forward. I guess the only other thing, I mean, just want to thank obviously my team for all the work they've done getting this over the line. It's been a long drawn out process since, well, it starts in, well, we'll say it starts February last year, January, February. That's when the work all starts. So it's a year-long job, and I just thank again to Matt, David, and the team, who, you know, without working closely with them, we wouldn't have got this over the line for November's meeting. So just thank you to them as well. And I haven't really got any other comments other than to say that you know, the public inspection and the offer to the Governance and Audit Committee to ask any questions, I haven't had any. There hasn't been any questions from the public, and I haven't had any queries back from anyone. So I haven't got any anything to report on that, which, you know, is good. But obviously the offer was there if anybody did want any detailed queries on the statement of accounts themselves. So thank you. I think if I at this stage pass on to Matt, is it? Matt, would you like to, Chair, is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yes, Matt.
Diolch, David. Thank you, Chair, and bore da aelodau. Good morning, members. And thanks, Steve, for the kind words and the words of thanks. I think, as you've reflected, it's been a challenging accounts prep and audit process to enable us to get to this stage. But I'll briefly take you, and we reflect on some of that in the report, and I'll briefly take you through some of those key elements now. But the report sets out the key findings arising from the audit of your draft financial statements. And we're also grateful to the finance team, to Steve, Rhian, and the rest of the team for their assistance and cooperation throughout the audit. And I recognise as well, I think that the delayed timetable has had an adverse impact on the finance team and also us as the audit team. You know, we've been auditing the accounts when we're usually focusing on other areas of work, so it has had a detrimental impact. We have agreed we'll meet once the dust has settled on this year's accounts, hopefully in December, early January, just to reflect on how it's been for both teams, I think, and to identify those lessons learned to help improve the process next year. But just turning to the report, in terms of the headline messages, once you've approved the financial statements today, the Auditor General intends issuing an unqualified audit report on your financial statements, so a positive outcome. And as Julian mentioned earlier as part of his intro, I think this is especially pleasing given it was the first year that you've needed to prepare group accounts that consolidated the accounts of Denbighshire Leisure Limited. So additional hoops for you as an authority to go through and additional disclosures to include within those accounts. And I'm pleased to say that's gone well from our perspective. There are a number of matters to report to you prior to your approval, but I've also recognised I think there are probably one or two new faces on the committee who've not previously been involved in the accounts approval process. So I thought it may be just worthwhile just spending a minute or so just explaining the Auditor General's responsibilities as your statutory external auditor. And the Auditor General is responsible for providing an opinion on your financial statements, and that opinion covers two key aspects. Firstly, whether in all material respects they give a true and fair view of the financial position of the authority for the financial year. And secondly, whether they've been prepared in accordance with CYFRA's Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting that sets out the requirements that you as a council are required to follow when preparing and reporting your financial statements. So in providing the opinion, we can't provide absolute assurance as we apply the concept of materiality. That's standard practice for the industry. And as you can see, I think on page 4, on page 286 of your pack, this led to a materiality level for the year of 3.8 million. Just to flag, we also apply a lower threshold for disclosures that we consider of particular interest to the user of the financial statements, as set out in paragraph 5 of the report. And those areas include, for example, senior officers' remuneration disclosures. We talked about some of the challenges we faced this year, and some of those challenges I think have arisen due to the way of working as a response to COVID. Obviously, we continue to work remotely. We're meeting over the screen today, and we've met with the finance team at council over the screen throughout the year. So it does feel very different, building on the experience we had last year. And Exhibit 1 of the report sets out the key ways really we've adapted and successfully responded to help overcome those challenges. And as Steve mentioned, we've also taken advantage of the flexibility, I guess, afforded by Welsh Government in extending the timescales for certifying financial statements this year. So just turning to the key findings, the audit identified 7 uncorrected misstatements, and they're set out in Exhibit 2 on pages 288 and 289 of your pack. And the international standards of auditing require us to formally request reasons in writing for not correcting those misstatements. And those reasons we've set out in the letter of representation in Appendix 1 of the report. And we ask that you provide that following approval of the accounts today. The majority of those uncorrected misstatements, as Steve mentioned, relates to unadjusted errors in Note 13 of the financial statements around property, plant and equipment disclosures. And examples include the misclassification of assets disposed of during the year that weren't necessarily correctly disclosed in the note, or revalued assets as part of your annual revaluation programme that were not correctly reflected in the financial statements either. And as Steve has reflected, whilst officers informed that all errors will be resolved in the current financial year, we're satisfied as your auditors that individually and collectively those errors are not material to your financial statements. But as we've set out on pages, or paragraphs 18 and 19 rather, we've highlighted a need for the council to develop a more efficient and effective accounts closure process for the accounting and recording of your property, plant and equipment. And that's something Steve acknowledged before I turned to the report. So to conclude, Chair, overall a positive outcome, and once you've approved the financial statements today and provide us with a letter of representation, the Auditor General intends issuing the unqualified opinion on your group financial statements on the 29th of November. So diolch cadeirydd, thank you, Chair, and I'll gladly take any questions.
Thank you, Matthew. Can I first of all, on behalf of the Governance and Audit Committee, thank David and yourself and Steve, your team, for the work that's been done this 12 months. You know, things have changed, not week by week, but day by day. And, you know, I think the work that's been done, which nobody sees, it's behind the scenes. So thank you on behalf of this committee. Any questions, members? Tony?
Right. Yes. Thanks for that, Chair. My question really is aimed at Steve, and yet again I go back to my concerns, and a lot of people's concerns about the staffing risks that we currently are hearing about and seeing about. And Steve, you've just said that you've got extra challenges because of your 2 senior managers cutting back their hours. And really where I want to get to, I just want to really focus on one area. Steve, I hope things are really good for you, even though I'm certain you're probably under a lot of pressure. But when we saw before the previous finance manager being headhunted, and you know, and I realize that can happen to anyone, but we were lucky because we knew you were in the wings, so we had a natural successor. Now, do we currently, because I'm apologize, I don't know all the staffing, but do we currently have what we could say could be a natural successor? Because let's not kid ourselves, anyone in this day and age can be headhunted, and you know, I'm again looking at risks, but especially risks to financial staffing. Are you able to answer that one at all, Steve?
I'll make a few comments, I think, Chair, if that's okay. Obviously, we're a small team,
yeah,
because we're a small council, and that's what, you know, it's one of those things that the support services of a small council have to fit the financial resources of a small council, but actually the work tends to be just as much as in a big council, because it's a statement of accounts is a statement of accounts. It doesn't matter how big the numbers are in that statement of accounts, you still got to do all the work to bring it together. So we are a small council, we have a small team. We have recognised over the last couple of years that we haven't got a huge number of, and there are 2 levels of accountancy qualifications for those who don't know. So you have your AAT level, and you have your CCAB, which is your ACCA, CITFA, you might have heard some of these, CIMA, all those, and they're fully qualified accountants. Now, obviously, to become Section 151 or Deputy 151 officer, you need to be, well, for Section 151, you have to be CITFA qualified, and we haven't got a huge number of them. Now, we have a group of finance managers where they're all hitting the same sort of age at the same time, and as Nicola alluded to earlier, in the pre-COVID, we probably might have expected people to stay 3-5 years longer, but they are making the decision, because of reassessing life and all those sorts of things, that people are deciding to retire early. We've also had our payments manager, our payroll manager, Glyn Wally, for those of you who might know him. He's retiring again at an earlier age than we would have expected, pre-COVID, but people are making those decisions and we've got to plan for that. So we are starting a trainee scheme, and we've got a couple of people who are starting that journey, if you like, but it does take a long time. It takes 4 years to get qualified. So I think in the short term, I've now have a very able Deputy 151 officer, which I didn't have during a lot of COVID because of not being able to recruit, which has been a fantastic help. And Shreyanne Evans has done actually most of the work on the statement of accounts, because I've been concentrating on the budget process and the strategies around that. So we're okay at the moment, but I think we're cognizant of the need to start skilling up our staff so that we have that throughput of staff going forward, I think is what I'd say.
Thank you, Steve. Just bring Gary in on that, Tony.
Well, it's just really just a general comment. I agree with a lot of what Steve has said and what Nicola said in response to the earlier discussion about recruitment and retention. I think the important thing in respect of succession planning is that we, as Steve is doing, are looking to ensure that we've got appropriately qualified people who are able to apply for those jobs. The use of the word natural successor, Steve wasn't handed this job on a plate. Steve had to compete for it and apply for it. And all of our recruitment processes are open and transparent, and they're required to be. So we don't have natural successors, but what we do strive to have is people who have the appropriate skills and experience who would be able to compete for those roles as and when they become available.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, Tony.
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Next, Gwyneth.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Ac fel rwy'n oedd ar y panel penodi, Steve, dwi'n falch iawn yn bod ni wedi ei benodio. Doedd gen I ddim amheuaeth ar y pryd. O'n i am godi y mater diffyg swyddogion yn adran Steve, ag ydyn ni'n talu digon, dyna un o'r cwestiynau, ag oeddech chi'n sôn, Steve, am y trainee schemes ma. Dwi'n gwybod o brofiad o bod ar cyrff eraill, mae rwy'n yn gallu hyfforddi, a wedyn wrach bydd y person yna yn symud ymlaen i rwle arall. Ydyn ni yn cadw dydwn cytundeb o mae'n rhaid i chi weithio droson ni am 3 neu 4 blynedd. Ag peth arall o'n i eisiau gofyn, gan mod na gymaint o newidiadau dros Gogledd Cymru, a da chi'n gorfod ffitio'ch gwaith dros y grwpiau Gogledd Cymru yma, fel yr bwrdd Ambition Board, fel enghraifft, ydy hwnna yn golygu lot mwy o waith i chi? Ag diolch am adael ni wybod fod glynwoli am beol, fydd o'n golled mawr. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you, Gwyneth. Steve, did you want to come back with him? Question for yourself rather than Matthew, I think.
Yes, I think. Yeah, on the, I'll pass on your kind words to Glyn. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Yeah, the trainee schemes that we're trying to put in place, with accountancy qualifications in local government, there is tend to be, it's an unwritten rule really, that if you become qualified and move on to another local authority, then we tend to waive the clawback of fees, because we could also benefit from that as well. So you kind of, it's a quid pro quo sort of thing. But if you go out of the sector, there's a 2-year limit when we can claim back fees if we see fit. Shreyanne Evans, who is my deputy now, she has done a lot of work with CYFRIFON over the years on CYFRIFON trainee schemes, and is working at the moment to try, and she's just put a camera on so you can see her. So just coming to put some schemes in place, both for, we have some internal candidates that are interested in going that step further to CYFRIFON, but also possibly in the future going out for a graduate trainee scheme. So that's kind of where we're at the moment, where our planning is. And the regional work, yes, it does, and I'm sure Gary would agree that it does on all support services, because what tends to happen is that, quite rightly, we try to take on that work within existing resources. And that's fine. You can do it for over a certain amount of time, but there does come a time where actually you're doing it, you've taken on so much extra work that you start to creak a bit. I don't think we're at that stage yet. Obviously the CJCs will be a big test going forward, or the new big test if you like. So I'm sure myself and Gary and the other support services will be keeping an eye on what's happening with that over the coming months, really, not years ago. It goes live in a month or so time, doesn't it? But over the coming months, as that matures and more work goes to those CJCs. But yeah, it is more work.
Thank you, Steve. Okay with that, Gwyneth? Thank you. Moving on to Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that other point, I've made a note here. Flexible retirement. I don't know if you as other councillors have noticed that when you email quite a few staff these days, they've gone down to 3 days a week. And I think, looking at the age group of those staff, I think we have far more people who are looking towards flexible retirement than possibly we realise. It would be good to know at some stage, and I know we've asked for an update on staffing issues, to know how many of our staff are looking at flexible retirement. And we all know that this is a COVID effect, so but it'd be good to know. Really, the questions I had, I think most of them have been answered. Steve mentioned, because I've got down here, public inspection. How many inquiries did we have from members of the public? Because I'm aware that in the past that sometimes has delayed the process. I think Steve's answered that and said none, which is amazing. Also, the misstatements issue, I was put a note here, that they all appear to be in assets, which I think Matthew referred to, and I've read it in the report last night. So as long as we can tighten up on that, there doesn't seem to be any real serious issues for us in the reports there. And at the end of the day, Matthew's report is key to this for us as councillors, because no matter how much great pleasure we get in reading through, 150 or 160 pages of financial statements or whatever, we do rely on the experts, and Matthew's obviously come back with reasonably positive response to this set of accounts. So, I'm quite happy with what we have before us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. If I just bring Gary back in with one of your comments.
It was just to confirm what Julian said earlier, that you know, there is a large workforce planning exercise going on at the moment for each service to look at those sorts of things, and then that will be sort of amalgamated into a corporate workforce plan as well. And as Julian said, we're looking at early new year for that to be completed, but the actual field work, if you like, is going on now.
Thank you, Gary. Seeing your thumb up there, Martin. Thanks. Rhys, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, as a new member of the group, I did appreciate that that explanation or introduction to matters. I think we have mentioned a few times about the need for training for new members, but maybe this isn't the time or the place for it. I have read through the report and my questions have all been answered. I'm satisfied with what I've seen. I'm just going to ask, showing my lack of knowledge of the jargon on page 296, where it says, matters on which I report by exception. Can you just tell me what that means? I think I know what it means, but matters on which I report by exception is written there.
Is
somebody
that for you,
just
Matthew?
explain?
Yep, Chair, do you want me to come back in there?
Yeah.
Steve, yeah, sorry.
No, yeah, Matt, thanks, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, the element or appendix 2 of the report there is the independent auditor's report, and that follows a standard template which the standards require us to report. So that section really would be any other elements we wish to draw to the reader's attention within the financial statements. So for example, if there's something within the narrative report at the front of the financial statements or the annual governance statement that it refers to there that our opinion wouldn't necessarily cover, then it gives us scope to raise that there. But as we've set out in the appendix there's nothing that we wish to raise.
Okay.
Committee.
That's fine. Thank you very much. And it does state then, I have nothing to report in respect of those matters. So that is, again, a positive thing to see there. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys. Thank you, Matthew. Well, I've seen no more hands up. So I'd like to thank Matthew. Rian didn't have much to say because it's all been said for you, but thanks for the hard work, Rian. And to Steve. Moving on to the recommendation to note the position as presented in the draft accounts. And I think you've done that, gentlemen and ladies. Okay, moving on. Would you just like a comfort break for 10 minutes? If we come back at 25 past? Thanks very much. Which is pages 283 to 306, to receive the Audit Wales Financial Sustainability Assessment Report relating to Denbighshire County Council. Is that Matthew or David?
Shall I say a few words on that, Chair, just to introduce it? Is that okay?
Thanks, David.
Thanks. Okay, so this is an overall positive report. Within the report, we comment on the COVID funding and the impact that that's had on the council's finances overall. And members will remember that throughout the year, you received regular reports on the impact of COVID. We cover the medium-term financial plan, which runs at the moment until 2024-25. As in previous reports, we cover reserves and the level of reserves that you're carrying. We sorry, we comment on the budget variations. Quite a small variation of 190,000 in 2019-20, but within that there were larger budget variations which existed, which showed that individual services had their own overspends, underspends, which netted off to the 190,000. We looked at the way that the council delivers its savings. So each year you have a savings target, savings plan, and how effectively you've gone about delivering that. And then finally we comment on the overall liquidity. So as I say, it's an overall positive report. I'm happy to take any questions on the report, and Matt and I can share those between us, depending where you target your questions. And there's a management response which responds to the one recommendation, which was about the budget variations. So I'm happy to leave it there, Chair, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, David. Any questions, members? Steve, you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to, sorry, just before people come in, just to highlight the management report in case, hopefully it's clear in our response, but I think the budget process that we put in place this year, which came to this committee in April, I think hopefully will cover that issue around making sure that we identify and deal with pressures in services, so that this time obviously we'll still continue to look at strategic pressures, but there's a new process for services to put forward pressures as well, and indeed for members, for groups to put forward proposals. So I think hopefully this year's process, and this year's process isn't a one-off. This is a process that hopefully puts us in a good position for the next 3 to 5 years, obviously depending on unforeseen events. But if everything settles down and we get our 3-year settlement, we're hoping that it will form the basis of a proper medium-term financial plan where we can plan savings and pressures over the medium term. So it's just a bit more detail on that our management response appendix there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Rhys, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one question from the detailed report, page 6 and 7 of 16. It's page 3112, 313 in the pack. The cost to the council of COVID-19, and there are a number of figures there. The amount that the council estimates it will have spent, 9.4, the amount of income it will have lost, and then there's the additional funding from Welsh Government. And then on the next page, that figure of 0.7, is that the figure not covered by the amount of additional funding? So what's the figure underneath, please? The additional funding, was that additional at the end of that process when there was this loss of 0.7 million? What's this 1.6 million? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you for that. The extra 1.6 million was additional funding which came through at the end of the year. It came through to each of the councils, and it came with 2 headlines. One was savings that had not been achieved during the year, and the second was around digital technology. Now, in the difference between that and the other COVID funds were that the councils, and Steve can probably confirm this, had to go through quite rigorous claims processes to attract the income for loss of income and also additional expenditure. But these 2 sums came through, or the one sum at 1.6 came through at the end of the year, which wasn't linked to actual expenditure, if you like. So the council didn't have to show that it had failed to achieve a sum of its savings, and it didn't have to demonstrate the digital costs. This was an additional sum.
Thanks, David. Steve wanted to come. That might help you.
Yeah, just to note as well, actually, the way that was administered as well wasn't anything on, as David said, it wasn't on a claim basis. It was actually dished out on the revenue support grant formula basis. So it was just an amount that was decided by Welsh Government to give Welsh local government support. It came through on the formula As David said, it came in late in the day. And that was one of the reasons, again, why the financial position last year made such a big, it improved remarkably towards the end of the year as these fundings in. The same thing happened with schools as well, and the school grants that came in right at year end that weren't for anything in particular, but were funding to help local authorities with the general COVID position. Yeah, so that's what that 1.6.
Thanks, Steve. Rhys, did you want to come back?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you very much. It's interesting how much money you can find down the back of the settee. Thank you.
You must have a good settee, Rhys. Martin?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. It was just a couple of points of clarification, really. What is the modified loan reserve of 4.6 million on page 9 of the document? Just as a matter of interest, what actually is that? I always understood that usable reserves, and we've got what, 36 to 38 million in usable reserves. That was always things that were in the pipeline. Am I incorrect in that statement? Because I know that Welsh Audit Office make quite a big thing about usable reserves and percentages and where we are in the league table in Wales as a county council, because obviously usable reserves are things that we're not spending money on at the moment, but we've got in the pipeline. That's my understanding, and that our reserves are something that we've been putting money aside for a rainy day, for the emergencies that come along, like floods and things like that. So could somebody just explain to me why we're homing in on that figure and why we're in a league table for that? That would be helpful. I always enjoy reading the auditor's reports because there's always some new words in there, and I always get my large dictionary out, as you all know. And the one of this report in this month is what do you mean by impactful service changes? I think I know what you mean, guys, but impactful is a new one on me, and it's not even in the dictionary, but there you go. But thank you very much, guys, for the report. It's pretty positive. It is, again, pretty positive, but just if you could clarify those two things for me. Thank you.
Hey, Martin. I think Steve will clarify your first question, and I think, Dave, that might be a Manchester word.
Yeah, I couldn't comment on that, but so the modified loan reserve is, I think it was 2 years ago now. It was created when about 10 years ago, a group of loans were all put into a pool and refinanced, if you like. I'm putting this very, it's more complicated than this, but so those were refinanced. Now what happened was that we chose to write that off in a particular way. And then the accountancy rules changed, which meant that we had to write it off in a different way, which actually what that means is that the amount we have to repay will increase over the next, I think it's 20 odd years left of the loan. So our amount we're going to have to pay will increase every year for the next 20 years. But what it means is that we've overpaid for the first 10 years. So what we've done with that overpayment was correct that overpayment and or effective overpayment or increase in the write-off. We've actually created the reserve with those funds, and those funds will be trickled down into the revenue accounts over the next 20 years to pay for that increase in writing off that loan over the next 20 years. What that means is I don't have to put a pressure in every year for the next 20 years to pay for that. Now, there is other ways of doing that, and we would always keep that under review. And it is one of those ones that, if forced to, so for example, at the beginning of the COVID crisis, when we didn't know whether we were going to get 23 odd million from Welsh government, we would have had to have looked at those sorts of reserves, but it would have a knock-on effect for the next 20 years. We would have to then have found pressures over the next 20 years, but it was one of those options. And I'm sure David will come back on the reserves, the wider reserves question, but I mean, I don't think Audit Wales will recognise that I think most Section 151 always make this point about that usable reserves figure. They are usable reserves, but that modified loan is one of them. So, for example, the capital grants unapplied is part of it. We have a winter maintenance reserve, that's part of it. So technically, or from an accounting point of view, you can reassign a lot of those reserves if you wanted to, but we would have to find the money in our revenue account going forward. So there's a balance there. The figure I suppose we would prefer to use is the unearmarked reserves, which is the 7 point, I can't remember, is it 7.2 or 7.4? I have to get the accounts up and I've got a small screen, so I can't find it. It's just over £7 million. And what we say on the usable reserves figure for us is that we don't want that to go below 5 million. And that's something that's again a local decision that we've made, but we want to keep it at least 5 million so that to allow us to cope with any issues such as COVID, etc., going forward. So that's the one that we would use. For example, if we overspent by £3 million in a particular year because of something we hadn't predicted, that's where it would come from those unearmarked reserves, that £7 million figure, rather than reviewing those other reserves. So there is a difference between the two, but it's one of those things. It's a measure of our financial standing to use that other figure, and that's fine. It's
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to remember that this report, the template that we use and the approach that we've used for this piece of work has been done across all 22 councils. And the approach was agreed with the Association of Worst Treasurers. The point that we were trying to make in here about reserves was that we just didn't want to reflect a position whereby the reader thought that there were lots of reserves that could necessarily be used for any pressures that came on the council. So we were just trying to clarify within the report some of the issues around reserves. So I think Steve's explained it better than I could. On the impactful service changes question, something more in my comfort zone. I probably wrote it, but what we were reflecting there was the fact that Denbighshire has been in a position where it's managed to meet its savings most years without too much impact on direct service provision. So there's been an awful lot of savings which have been made in back office functions where members of the public would never be able to see that. But there's only so much that you can do in that area, and at some stage it's likely that the council will get to a position, if the cuts continued, where it would have to make some savings that would mean a direct impact on service users. So that's what we were trying to reflect in our creation of a new word for the English dictionary.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, David. Yeah, just say thanks very much, David. I thought that's what you meant, but it was just, as you know, I always get the dictionary out if there's something I'm not sure about. What was I going to say to you? Yeah, so actually on the fact that we're 10th stroke 11th in the league table is probably a reasonable place to be, is it? In the sense that we haven't gone over the top and we're not skirting along the bottom, as it were. But thanks for that, Dave.
Thanks, Martin. Any more? Steve, you want to come back?
Yeah, I'd just say I always like to be in the middle of the pack on most things. It makes me feel safer, I think.
Cheers, Steve. Okay, then, members. Moving to the recommendation that the corporate governance notes the report and considers the management response. Thank you for that. Moving on then, members, to agenda item number 9, which is internal audit update, pages 307 to 344, to consider a report by the Head of Internal Audit, updating members on the internal audit progress. Lisa, you still awake?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just about. Yeah, this is the standard report that we bring. The last time we presented the internal audit update was July 2021. So this is an update on internal audit work since then. Appendix 1 goes into detail, but I'll just I'll put a little bit more in the covering report this time. So I'll go through that first of all as a summary. There were 5 audits that have been completed, one of which received a low assurance rating. So that report's been included as Appendix 2, and that report's included in full. There's also 3 follow-up reviews. That committee requested an update because they were previously low assurance. 2 were given a medium assurance, the last follow-up. So that's included in this internal audit update report. And 1 was given a low assurance rating last time. So that is item 10 on your agenda pack. So we'll cover that separately afterwards. In terms of 4.3 then, you're covering report on page 326. Progress in delivering the audit plan, there has been an impact due to carrying a vacancy. We have filled the senior auditor position with a secondment from an auditor, but in turn that's created another vacancy at an auditor level. But it does ensure that we've got someone that's able to carry out the more high risk sort of complex audits that we do. And it's good that we had someone internal that could step up into that role. The senior auditor that was seconded to the trace, test and protect that's been further extended to June 2022 now. So continued impact on the internal audit team because of that. There's also our involvement in whistleblowing and investigations has had an impact on our resource and able to deliver assurance work. I'll come onto that in a minute. But just need to reevaluate what's in the internal audit plan and what assurance that we require for the annual governance statement. So if I just go to page, let me just scroll down, page 331 of your packs. This is page 3 of the internal audit report. There's a table there that summarises the audit work that we've completed since the last update. So of the 5 audits that we carried out, 2 were given high assurance. They were both grant audits, so very positive conclusions there. The housing rent arrears audit, we try and cover housing rents regularly because of the values of the financial values that go through there. That was given the medium assurance rating. The exceptions, exemptions and variations from contract procedure rules, that was given a low assurance rating, as I mentioned before, and the full report included as Appendix 2. I propose, Chair, that we go on to that afterwards. Gary Williams, Lisa Jones and Steve Gadd are here to provide a response from the council in terms of what the situation is, what the plan is in terms of the action plan, and also May Pulston-Jones, the senior auditor who carried out the audit, just to give you a brief summary of the work that was carried out on that low assurance area. If I could give you a quick summary of the Denbighshire Leisure Limited audit, because I think that's most probably of relevance to the committee in terms of getting that assurance over the arrangements in place between Denbighshire Council and Denbighshire Leisure. It was the first time we've reviewed it. It was a high-level review of the governance arrangements and the management of key risks following the transition of leisure services to the new wholly owned company, Denbighshire Leisure Limited. We didn't cover financial systems in any detail because they were due an audit, but we did cover a high level sort of financial management as part of the contract management piece that we looked at. We gave assurance overall that the governance arrangements in place are robust. It's a similar governance model that's been tried and tested with the Civica partnership. It's the same contract manager within Denbighshire who's experienced that carries out that role through monthly operational board that monitors performance. And also there's a strategic governance board with members on there, which ensures that that relationship between the council and the company is well managed. We just raised a couple of issues, a couple of matters that we raised. One was around the Strategic Governance Board receiving report packs from the Board of Directors at Denbighshire Leisure Limited, such as meeting minutes and things like that, as is stipulated in the members' agreement. That hadn't been carried out to date. And the other part that we raised was relating to Schedule 4, the contract, which required details of the high value assets, that wasn't available during our audit. So that was something to be addressed. But overall, a very positive review. And so I just wanted to mention that. The next follow-up audit, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, or PCI DSS for short. This is our second follow-up review. It was given medium assurance at the last follow-up, so I've just provided a brief summary there of the progress as committee requested that a further progress update came back. So as is on page 337 there's some bullet points which clarifies the remaining actions to be completed. But there is good progress. It has been impacted by COVID-19 in terms of consultant availability, but there's still progress nonetheless, and on track to complete the action plan with a further review planned for June 2022. I'm just conscious Martin's got his hand up. I don't know if that's about this, or do you want to wait until the end? Yep.
Yeah, wait until the end.
Okay. And then the housing tenancy, again, committee requested a progress update. So I've just summarised the result of our follow-up audit there. It was our second follow-up. And there was just one action that was due. The other remaining actions were not due until March 2022, but we have been able to see that tenancy fraud training's taken place and the review of the National Fraud Initiative. There's some housing matches where there might be potential fraud cases that haven't been able to be picked up at the time of our review, but as I understand it, they have been picked up since then, so that there is progress there. And we've got another follow-up planned for March 2022 on that one. Contract management, as I said, is item 10, so I won't go into any detail on that. Where I mentioned earlier about the impact on internal audits resource due to carrying a vacancy, and also investigation work that we've been supporting the council with. There are some audits that we won't have the capacity to carry out, but having spoken to Audit Wales, I understand that some of the national studies that they're carrying out, as well as part of their springing forward work, should provide some coverage of some of the areas that we were intending to look at. So we'll be able to place some reliance on other assurance areas, so that will help. And also in terms of liberty safeguards, we understand that the guidance from Welsh Government is still further delayed. So in terms of providing assurance, I think it would be better to wait for that. And in the meantime, there is assurances provided through CIW, that's the Care Inspectorate Wales and the Health Inspectorate Wales, that we're able to gain some assurances from. On page 343, just a counter fraud update. We're seeing a lot more fraud alerts coming through from the National Anti-Fraud Network that we're subscribed to. And when that happens, we forward them on to the relevant service. A lot of mandate frauds where companies are trying to get the council to change their supplier bank details by providing fictitious information, but we've got good controls in place to prevent that. There's also a senior auditor since passed the CIPFA accredited counter fraud specialist training, so to be able to carry out investigations in line with legal requirements should they need to go to court. There's referrals there. Again, 3 allegations, mostly coming through from whistleblowing, where members of staff are raising concerns. Gary Williams brings a report separately on whistleblowing each year, and I think that's due to come in January. So there'll be a bit more detail on that then. And then finally, on the internal audit performance, just to highlight, the completion of internal audit action is still below target, although improved from the previous update provided. So from 42% up to 53% of audit actions that are completed by the date that services have said that they will be completed by. So we are satisfied that services are making progress, but we do understand that there are capacity pressures, as it's been a theme during this meeting that's been discussed, and that's clear, particularly in some services, and also ongoing pressures because of COVID-19. So if we then go on to Appendix 2, that's on page 347. The audit of contract exceptions, exemptions and variations from the contract procedure rules. I'll just do a brief intro. I'll then pass over to Maeve to go through a summary of the audit. And as I said, Gary, Lisa and Steve might want to comment from the council's perspective. In terms of the reason for the audit, they can be termed as waivers from CPRs, so that there should be a justification for that, and that was the key scope of the audit, was to look that they were used appropriately in line with contract procedure rules. And we also looked at some of the decisions taken during COVID-19 in terms of use of contract exceptions and exemptions, just to make sure that such emergency procurement decisions, that there was a rationale and justification for any exceptions or extensions used. This is one of our proactive counter fraud reviews. Use of exceptions and extensions can be a red flag for fraud. So we do try and ensure that we can have some proactive counter fraud audits each year. And whilst it's always quite difficult to identify procurement fraud, the nationally procurement fraud is seen as a high area of risk. So yeah, I'll pass over to Maeve for an update.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. I don't intend to go through the report line by line. I take it by review.
Dave, maybe if you turn your video off, you're breaking up badly.
Okay, we'll do. Is that better, everyone?
That's it. Thanks, mate.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so just by way of additional context, this review was actively encouraged by the legal and procurement team. And as Lisa said, we also sought to assess what, if any, impact the COVID pandemic had on the use and prevalence of exception and extension requests. So I'll use the terms, hopefully not too interchangeably, but exceptions is generally where the contract has been awarded directly, and extensions or variations, or as it suggests, where an existing contract has been extended. So we did a sample of, or we tested a sample of decisions over the last 2 financial periods. And we did find some areas of good practice and proactive engagement between services and the procurement team. But we wanted to sort of see if the criteria were being applied properly for granting exceptions and extended contracts. And adhering to the contract procedure rules. So the contract procedure rules, whilst they are quite detailed in general, the provisions for granting exceptions and exemptions and variations are relatively clear and concise. And the criteria for granting these similarly are quite clearly set out. So we tested, as I say, a sample of some of the decisions and contracts granted over the last 2 financial periods. And we focused on the approval and decision-making process and how advice from legal and procurement was addressed by the services. And we went through the samples with the contract managers, the procurement business partners, and heads of service. So I think it's safe to say that the pandemic didn't actually increase the volume and prevalence of directly awarded contracts or indeed contract extensions. But as you'll appreciate, given some of the commercial sensitivities involved, I don't intend to go into the details of specific contracts, but maybe if I could just pull out some of the key themes from the 4 issues we identified. So I think overall, the first, I suppose, underlying issue was the depth and breadth of understanding of the contract procedure rules and their application in this area. And that varied across services, and as we found, was a contributory factor to some of the instances of non-compliance with the CPRs, particularly in relation to the approval requirements, i.e. who's the authorised approver, when contract extensions and variations and exceptions are being granted. There was, as you would expect, a number of contracts awarded under the extreme urgency criteria over the last 18 months where procurement activity couldn't take place because of the COVID pandemic. When directly awarded contracts are granted under this criteria, there are more stringent approval requirements. And our testing found that the approval requirements weren't fully understood by services, and that was almost across the board. There wasn't one particular service where there was more instances of directly awarded contracts being granted, but just the requirements as to who is required to approve these wasn't always clear, that was understood. Similarly, in relation to the higher value contract extensions, and then other areas we found where, for example, the requirement for a formal contract where the contract value exceeds 25,000. So those are just some sort of key examples of lack of understanding of the CPRs that we found in our sample testing. Now, as part of the process of granting exceptions and extensions, services are required to seek review and guidance from the legal and procurement team. So the second issue that we've raised in our report relates to the transparency of decision making and authorization of contracts following advice given by legal and procurement. So in some instances, the decision maker chose not to follow the advice and recommendations given by legal and procurement teams, but it wasn't always clear what the rationale was for not following this advice. It wasn't clearly recorded. And in some instances, the advice wasn't fully addressed prior to the commencement of the contract. So obviously there are implications there for clarity and transparency of recording decision-making when awarding or extending contracts. And that's something that we've engaged with the contract managers and heads of service where we have come across such examples where the decision has been taken for various reasons to proceed with the contract. And then the third issue, and it's an issue that's included in the recent contract management review, the follow-up of which we'll come on to shortly, but it essentially relates to the recording and monitoring of contract exceptions and extensions on the council's electronic procurement system. And that is a requirement of the CPRs that contracts are recorded on the electronic procurement system. And we found that this has not been done by services. And the knock-on effect of that is that it can lead to ineffective contract performance monitoring and also procurement planning. So where the services aren't recording the expiry date of the contract on the procurement system, it can come round very quickly and can sometimes lead to not having sufficient time to undertake a full procurement exercise and tendering exercise. So it's the use of the procurement system or lack of use of the procurement system that is an issue that we flagged both in this review and was an issue that was flagged in the contract management review. And then finally, and it's I suppose it's linked to the previous issue, and that's procurement planning. So we found in our sample testing, and we did 10 extended contract decisions over the last 2 financial years out of a population of 35. And of those 10, only 1 had not been subject to a previous contract extension. And in some cases, they were long-running contracts that hadn't been subject to a formal tender process in the first instance. So as our report brings out, where such contracts are extended continually, it does pose a risk to achieving value for money and supporting the local economy. So those I suppose were our key findings in the review, and which has led to the low assurance opinion. So I shall pause there and take any questions from members.
Thank you, Maud. Martin, you had your hand up first.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just is it Maureen? Did you say? Because
no, it's Maeve.
Maeve.
Sounds like Dave,
Maeve.
only with an M. Yes.
Yeah, Maeve. That's okay. That's grand, Maeve. Thank you very much. Can I say that that was a very clear report, and you know, thank you for that. Obviously, the work has been done. With exceptions, I just understand from what you're saying is basically they haven't gone out to tendering, have they? They've just somebody's just been awarded a contract. Is that what we're saying? Is that what exceptions mean? Correct. Okay. And obviously, this is a small this is a sample that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
Have we concerns that this may be a little bit more problematic than just the sample? Because obviously, as you rightly say, you know, contracts is a key area for us to make sure that we're getting value for money, that we are monitoring them, and that they're going out to the right people. You know, we've gone through a proper process, and yes, there is a risk in dealing with contracts if we're not careful, and obviously for staff themselves, it's important that we make sure that this is a secure process, so that nobody can point fingers at anybody at any time. And then finally, could somebody just explain to me what is a tackle exemption? On page 336, Lisa, that might be one for you. It's further on in the report rather than Maeve. But just what is a TECL, TECKEL exemption? Thank you.
But just bring Gary in for that one, Martin.
So, I'm glad Gary's going to answer it. I was going to attempt to, but I'm sure Gary will do it better than me.
Okay, well, Lisa Jones is on the call, and she knows more about it than I do, so I'm sure she'll put me right. But I'll have a stab. TECL effectively is the name of a case. It was a European case, and it established the following principle: that it was possible for a public sector organisation to enter into a contract with an entity that it controlled, provided that there was no private sector involvement in that entity, that the public body was able to show that it retained the same degree of control over that entity as it would in respect of one of its own service departments, and that the entities, that at least 80% of the turnover of that entity was related to work or services being performed for that public body. So the easy example is that DLL, so a contract that the council has with DLL, is exempt from the procurement processes because DLL is a TECL entity. I hope that makes sense. And I'll pause now for 10 minutes and hold my breath in case Lisa comes and tells me that I got that wrong.
You got that absolutely spot on, Gary. The other sort of easy sort of description is any contracts that we might award to one of our departments in-house. The regulations permit that as well without us having to go out to tender. So thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Gary has just wiped his brow with his handkerchief. Martin, I'm sure Maeve will come back with the other questions you had.
Yeah. So, Martin, if I understood correctly, your question is about the prevalence of awarding direct contracts. And as you'll be aware, we operate a joint procurement service with Flintshire. So I was able to obtain information on the number of contracts that were awarded directly in the financial year 19 to 20 and 2021. So it would cover a period pre-COVID pandemic and in the midst of COVID pandemic. And the numbers of directly awarded contracts didn't actually change in those two periods and were broadly equivalent with the number of directly awarded contracts that Flintshire have issued in the last year. So I don't think we're an outlier in terms of awarding direct contracts, and there are very set and narrow criteria for when contracts can be awarded directly. One of the criteria is extreme urgency due to unforeseen events. And as you would expect, that came up a few times and was the criteria used for some of the directly awarded contracts. Say, for example, emergency COVID works that needed to be applied in certain buildings and things like that needed a sort of quick turnaround. So that, you would expect the criteria to be applied appropriately there, and we didn't find any indications that the criteria in that circumstance wasn't applied correctly. I think what our review found was that the authorization of those extreme urgency contracts, they have, as I said, more stringent approval requirements. They require head of service approval, and the understanding of services of that requirement wasn't always evident. So a potential breach there in getting the correct authorization. Does that answer your question, Martin?
Yeah,
or?
Thank you very much. That's
No
grand.
problem.
Thank you.
Cheers, Martin. Rhys?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got 4 questions. The first one may overlap with what I just heard there, but I'll still ask for confirmation. We're talking about these extreme urgency contracts that were awarded. Did you find any discrepancies there that these weren't exactly extreme urgency contracts? Did they all fit in with that definition of there being the need for extreme urgency? That's the first question. The second one, you did say that these extreme urgency matters were spread across services. We don't want to go into examples, I realize that, but are the non-compliance examples, are they also spread across all services? That's the second question. And then thirdly, is the conclusion that you're drawing from this and that we're all drawing from this is that it's the proactive system that's not being used correctly. And so training in that matter would actually help to alleviate these difficulties. So is it the proactive system we should be concentrating on? And the other question, you've just mentioned Flintshire Council there. I notice on page 349 that this review focused on decisions made by Denbighshire County Council only, and yet we operate a joint procurement service. Presumably Flintshire focus on the decisions made by Flintshire. What is the audit and governance procedure for these joint procurement services? Maybe that's something I should know, but someone can remind me. Okay, thank you, Chair. Those are the 4 questions.
Thank you, Rhys. Maeve, do you want to come back with them?
Yes, of course. So of the 10 decisions we looked at, I think 4 were granted exclusively under the extreme urgency provisions or criteria, and then 2 had extreme urgency and specialist contractor required. So that the specialist contractor, by virtue of their specialist technical or artistic knowledge, was included in that. And the procurement team came back in one instance, or sorry, legal came back in one instance and said, you know, you might be on sort of stronger footing with the technical expertise. So in the 4 examples I referred to where it was extreme urgency, there was nothing to indicate that it wasn't an extreme urgent case, and it was very much COVID pandemic related. Your second question, I think, was about is non-compliance. No, your second question, I think, was in 2 parts. One was the extreme urgency across all services. I think by its very nature, some of it there were 2 within social services, and one was within education services, and then there were 2 within property, and the third, was within business improvement and modernisation. So they were all genuinely extreme urgency criteria. So I would say yes, of the ones I looked at, there was a good mix of services involved there. Non-compliance and or sort of understanding of the contract procedure rules, yes, that is prevalent across all services. And then proactive, so we'll touch on this when we come on to the contract management follow-up, and I think it's not unfair to say that proactive is not being used as intended and as required by the contract procedure rules. So one of the actions, and I'm jumping ahead, but indulge me for a second, one of the actions in the contract management follow-up was to look at whether the proactive system is fit for purpose, and I think it would be unrealistic to come to a conclusion on whether or not the system is fit for purpose until such times as it's been used properly by all services. So I would say probably let's not focus on the proactive bit, let's focus on services using proactive, because it's there to sort of provide good contract management and will aid with procurement planning as well. And then I think your final question was on what's the audit process for the joint procurement service with Flintshire and ourselves. I may ask Lisa to jump in here. I know there was a previous audit done on the setup of the joint procurement service with Flintshire and Denbighshire, so I'm going to hand over to Lisa to take that question, if you don't mind, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there is a board in place. I know Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill sits on that board with that oversees and provides the governance over the joint procurement service at Flintshire and Denbighshire, and they monitor some of the performance and things like that, which is what we audited, I think, about 3-4 years ago now. And there was an action plan on the back of that just to improve some of the governance arrangements, and most of which have all been implemented since.
Chair, if I could just add to that. Yes, whilst we obviously have a joint from an administration and delivery point of view procurement team between ourselves and Flintshire, there are differences between the way that the two authorities operate, because we're two different authorities. Essentially, in terms of who would scrutinise the elements of it, that would be dealt with independently. So we would scrutinise the Denbighshire elements and Flintshire would scrutinise the Flintshire elements of it. And if there are cross-cutting ones, it probably would go to both.
Thanks, Julian. Does that answer your question, Rhys?
Yes, thank you very much. I think I'll need to think a bit more about this, these joint contracts, but for this morning, yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys. Paul, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking at it from a slightly different view. First of all, I think in all the time that I've been a member, I cannot recall having a similar report with 4 significant major issues. In a sense, it's almost verging on critical, because when you consider the involved, you're talking of probably revenue and capital contracts, many hundreds of them across all services, many thousands of pounds involved. So it's a big area, a very big area, whichever way you look at it. And this, to me, is so important. I noticed that in the internal audit update summary, there is reference to an escalation meeting involving senior management, lead member, and then discussions at corporate executive team. To me, this is one of the most significant low assurance internal audit reports we've received. So we need, I believe, as a committee to consider how we get involved for our future meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Who wants to come back on Paul's questions there?
Well,
hang on, Gary.
Sorry, the escalation process is I don't want to tread on Lisa's toes here, but the escalation process is a process for any low assurance report. Gets discussed with the relevant lead member, also with senior management, and it's been to CET and is going to SLT at the beginning of January, I think the 6th of January. In terms of the committee getting involved, then clearly it will be for you to determine what follow-up reports you want back to this committee on the basis of the action plan that's been put forward.
Thank you, Gary. Does that answer it, Paul?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. I just think that we've had a number of low assurance reports over the years. This has to be one of the top 2 or 3 in terms of its impact on the council and the need for us to pay close attention to the responses to it. That's all.
I think you're correct there, Paul. And I think when we come to recommendation, then we need to think about that.
Can I just come in on that?
Yeah, come on, Lisa.
Yeah, I think the results of this audit needs to be considered alongside the previous audit of contract management, which is the next item, which was also a low assurance report. And you'll see the follow-up results. We're still reporting it as low assurance in terms of progress. Although there has been progress made, it hasn't yet resulted in services taking the required action. So corporately, things are happening. But another factor that needs to be considered is that the previous legal and procurement manager raised her concerns about the use of exceptions and exemptions and the services taking note of them, which is one of the reasons why we did the audit. That position hasn't been filled as yet, I'm aware, so there is a capacity issue there. And when we come on to the contract management piece, there's also a lack of ownership of contract management in the place. It doesn't really sit anywhere at the moment, which is something that I know that when we come to that follow-up is being addressed. So I think the two together, I think Paul exactly right in terms of the low assurances in this area is of concern, and I think committee getting updates on the two together in future should assist, and something that when we took it to corporate executive team, we had the similar conversations there about them monitoring what is happening with these two audits to ensure that the necessary change and culture change it happens. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Totally agree, Lisa.
So who's taking us through the next part?
Thank you.
Lisa?
I think it's the recommendation, or if you want to hear from the services in terms of the actions proposed, or
would you like that, or do you want to go to recommendation, members? I'm in your hands.
I think it would help to know what's coming next in order to make our minds what this committee is going to ask, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys.
Do you want me to refer to the action plan?
Yes, thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Chair. Excuse me, members. The action plan is contained from page 352 onwards. So you'll see that in response to the first issue around general understanding of the CPRs, there are a number of actions there that fall to the procurement service to take, and that's about making sure that there's a presentation to all. Just for Martin's view, the JAG and their DMG is departmental management groups or departmental management teams, so that each service will be updated in respect of the CPRs. The procurement business partners will be able to attend departmental management team meetings in order to be able to provide support and advice. There is already a quick guide in respect of the CPRs, but that will be amended and will use other methods such as link to highlight good practice. And the other issue was around making sure that the variation forms set out what previous variations may have been sought, and attaching copies of those variations to reflect the sequence of legal and procurement comments. The issue there is that forms for authorising exceptions get sent through to senior managers to be able to sign off, but it's just improving the information that's included in the form in order that those who are authorising have got the full picture. In respect of issue number 2, regarding transparency and accountability, again, revisions to the exception and variation forms to include a comment box that would have to be filled in by the relevant head of service to provide their rationale if they were departing from the advice that was being given by legal and procurement. That the variation forms as well have a task list in, so that there's a commitment from the services to actioning the advice that they would be given by legal and procurement, such as checking insurance provision, etc. And one for legal services where we categorise legal advice as whether it's high, medium or low, and that if we are saying it's high risk, then that's peer reviewed by another colleague in legal services for a second opinion before we categorise it as such. Then in terms of the issues around Proactis, as I said, a report to SLT highlighting the weaknesses identified. there was a report that was supposed to go to SLT earlier this month, but agenda management issues meant it didn't get on, and so it's been bumped to the 6th of January. That ensuring that training is rolled out across relevant staff, both in the two parts there of the contract management module and the contract management principles. And that's an overlap with the contract management report, because there's a contract management forum now, which we'll discuss later, which will be able to lead on that and make sure that services are cooperating with that. The quick guide we've referred to previously. And that procurement business partners would be able to support services in respect of their use of Proactis in order that they can plan their procurement cycles. Because one of the issues where we could potentially end up with exceptions or extensions would be where there's been insufficient planning in terms of the next contract for a particular service, and services may end up in a situation where without that proper planning they're seeking extensions in order to give them time to be able to do that. In respect of, and it brings us on to the planning and the culture, making sure that procurement business partners are invited on a regular basis to departmental management teams, and that each service have a procurement forward work plan so that they can horizon scan projects and activities that may require procurement, and then the procurement business partners to support that activity. And then the other thing which we discussed at CET this week is that I would take a report to CET on a regular basis to enable them to see a range of indicators around compliance with CPRs, so that they could be satisfied from a corporate point of view that all was well, or if not, that they could raise those issues with relevant heads of service.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, members. If we go then to the recommendation.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Obviously, guys, we've gone through all of that, and I wonder sometimes whether in a lot of our departments in County Hall that we don't use some form of control form for a process. You know, where you have a process, there should be something set out that the member staff ticks as they go through that process. And this, to me, is a classic example of having a properly a form set up so that it asks all the questions. You know, is this, have you gone to tender? Is this an exemption? If it is, has it been signed off? And somebody signs it off. And then you go down through that form, and the final one should be, has this been put on the computer system, Proactis or whatever it is? And the staff member should then sign it off at the bottom to say they've done all that. It's just like a checklist, really. You know, and I'm amazed that a lot of our departments don't use that sort of process. And it would be easier for audit, because audit could then come along and say, well, where's the control sheet, the sign-off sheet for this particular contract, and it should be at the front of the file to prove that it's all been followed through. It's, you know, it's just a point, but as I say, past life I was a process manager as well, so that's what we did. But anyway, there we are.
Cheers, Martin. Lisa, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just on Martin's point, you absolutely identified and links in with Reese's question regarding the use of Proactis in order to improve the whole situation. Proactis as a system will have, it's like a workflow, and you can't move on to the next stage unless you've completed that particular activity. So if we're using Proactis correctly, the controls would be there because it would prevent the service from moving on to the next stage. So it's built into the system, and absolutely feeds into Rhys Thomas's question. You know, this Proactis as our tool to improve compliance is absolutely fundamental to bringing this level of compliance up really. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Gwyneth, you want to come in?
Yes, sorry. The Denbighshire Leisure, do do they pay for the audit? That's one. I see Rhythm Town Council is an external audit. Do you have many other external audits like that? And the deprivation of liberty on page 340, could you just clarify that? What is that? Thank you.
So I think those are questions probably for Lisa in earlier parts of the report.
Yeah, sorry, I'm.
Yeah, yeah, Rhythm Town Council's an external sort of very small piece of work that we do, so a couple of days looking at their annual accounts. Denbighshire Leisure Limited, the review that was part of the internal audit update was done from a Denbighshire perspective. So Denbighshire Leisure didn't pay for that, but we do provide an internal audit service to Denbighshire under the SLA and support services as part of the contract. And so Denbighshire Leisure will pay for any internal audit we do for them. The deprivation of liberty is safeguards, or it applies to, which we won't get the legal aspects exactly right, but it's making sure that people have a voice if they haven't got capacity, and that their human rights and things like that haven't been impacted. So there's mental health assessments and things like that that need to be in place for that. But there is going to be a change to how that is delivered with new guidance from Welsh Government on that, that we were hoping to review once that's been shared, but it's been delayed until 2022 now, so the audit will be pushed back as well.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Diolch.
Thank you. Rhys, you wanted to come back?
Only to say, Chair, that I agree with Paul there that some of the weaknesses that have been discovered here are pretty basic ones, like not ensuring value for money and things like this. So I am very concerned about parts of this report, but having heard what Gary Williams has said there, steps seem to be have been taken, and there are things also planned for the next few months. I'm just wondering what this committee can do to not put pressure on, but to be reassured in a few months' time that we're going in the right direction. So how long do officers think that it will take to actually get this message about using ProActis properly out to departments, when we can review the thing again and see that what we're back on track? So how long do you think that will take then, Chair?
Okay, Rhys, I'll bring Gary back in, and then in the recommendations, I'm sure there's something there that we can ask for a report coming back as soon as possible. Gary?
The first thing to say, Chair, is that it's not that I don't think Rhys should be concerned about putting pressure on. That one of the roles of the committee, and actually welcome the oversight of the committee, as we asked for the audit report as well, in order that provides additional impetus and gravity to what we're asking people to do. So we welcome the report, and we welcome the committee's oversight of it. Just looking at the action plan, I suppose it depends for Lisa and her team as to when they would be able to do a follow-up, but I think most of the actions are due to have been put in place by the end of March. So it's a case of when audit would be wanting to look at doing a follow-up report and then bring something back to this committee.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, Rhys.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just being polite in the way I phrased all of that. Thank you, Chair.
As ever, Rhys, as ever.
Thank you.
Paul, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, only to say, Chair, that in the past, this committee has not shied away from being quite firm in saying what it thinks. And specifically, when we have, for example, in the past, had problems on issues related to schools, we have called head teachers and chairs of governors to appear before us. If we felt that was necessary with contract managers now, we shouldn't shy away from doing something similar. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'll bring Gary in.
I think, in fairness, that's been done where people have not been progressing things or have not been necessarily cooperating with audit. This is the first consideration of the report by the committee, and there is an action plan, and we will be progressing with that. And I think that the appropriate thing to do would be to have a follow-up report at the appropriate time and then bring a report back to committee for committee to consider the progress that's been made.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, Paul.
Okay, Chair.
If we move then to the recommendations, that the committee considers the report content, assesses the internal audit's progress and performance. 3.2, that the committee decides whether it needs further assurance on any of the audited areas to follow up progress with implementing the improvement action plans. I'm in your hands.
Yes, we do require further assurance to follow up any progress that's being made, Chair. What length of time did we decide on?
Can I add the follow-up is scheduled for June next year, which is based on the implementation dates that services provided in the action plan. So we could bring it to the July meeting. We could bring the follow-up then.
Yes, please.
There from
Mr. Chairman.
Just to say, it'll be up to residents whether I'm here. But yes, Martin, you want to come back?
Well, I wonder whether we could have something back a little sooner than that in relation to the use of Proactus, because you're all saying that this is the key part to this, because if they use that properly, then they will follow a process. That's what Lisa was saying earlier as well. Lisa Legal now rather than Lisa Audit. So I wonder whether we could have something earlier than that, just for an update on whether Proactus is being used as it should be, because I think that that's something that we can deal with quite quickly. A lot of the other stuff, yeah, okay, June or July for a report back is okay, but perhaps, you know, in March or something like that, we could have an update on how Proactus is being used. Thank you.
Just before we get an answer on that, Lisa or Gary, I'm just wondering, with this Proactive, is there a problem with the movement of staff, and that when staff gets moved around, new staff that's coming in are not up to au fait with Proactive, and whether when new staff come in, Proactive is one of the first things that they should get in the training?
Well, Lisa Jones may have a view. My own view is that, well, clearly, when staff arrive new in post, then they should be trained appropriately on the systems that they will need to use. But I think it's a bit more fundamental than that in respect of Proactus. It's the use of it in general. Lisa may be able to say more than me, but it's not an entirely intuitive system, as I understand, to use, and it's not always popular with everybody in the way that it's used, but it is the system that we have, and it's the system that people should be using. And so the thrust of this report is that we should be where people aren't using it appropriately, we should be doing as much as we can to ensure that they are able to do it because they've been trained, but also that we're monitoring the use of it so that where people have been trained to use it, they are using it.
Thanks, Gary. Steve Gadd, you put your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to make the point that just because Proactis has been had so much focus on it, Proactis has a number of modules, and a lot of those modules are around just actually paying people and getting, for example, all the corporate card stuff goes through there, all the mileage allowances go through, but that is a separate module from the procurement module. You don't have to use both, they're not even linked. So I just don't want to, it's not proactive, just don't want the good bit of Proactis to be sort of actually that bit that we use for paying purposes works really well. So I just wanted to flag that just in case you heard Proactis used in another meeting.
Thanks for that.
Sorry, I should have clarified that it is a specific module, and one of the issues in the contract management report is to actually take a look at whether or not Proactis is the right module, but it's the one we've got now and people should be using it.
Ellie, before we move on, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say, I did use Proactis in my other life, and what I found it really annoying is in June, we'd ask all the staff to give us their orders for the new school year. Well, they didn't understand that we had to type it all out, and it was just getting the rest of the staff in the schools to know. And then when invoices arrived back, and maybe it was addressed to a teacher, I'd be then running around school looking for the blessed invoice so that I could progress it through the Proactis. So hearing everything now, but that is only the school invoices module. So I didn't do anything with petrol claims, but it was very efficient, and I was really pleased to read in I've got it written under 10 that they now send reminders for staff to get the invoices paid, and I think that's good, because especially in schools, when you know that invoices are probably on a teacher's desk. But it's been very good hearing all this going on anyway. All right.
Ellie,
yeah.
So we've been to the recommendation, and I think the committee would like a follow-up on the improvement of action. I know Lisa was writing down, trying to see when she thinks they could come back with that. Have you any inclination?
Like I said, that our follow-up is scheduled for June, but you could request a report from the service earlier on the use of Proactis to come in March or April, and then you can get our assurance in July when the majority of the actions are due to be completed.
I think that sounds like a good idea. What do you think, members? Yeah, that'd be
Yes,
great.
please, Chair. We
Okay.
can't let the grass grow on this one.
No. Lisa Jones, you want to come in? Lisa, are you there?
Sorry, Chair. I was on mute. Yeah, happy to bring an update report in March or April, whenever that date falls for the committee. A short update report on where we're up to, and it will help keep the momentum going, and actually provide us with a lever as well when we're visiting departmental teams that corporate governance will be requiring an update at that time. Where are you up to with regards to ensuring your staff are utilising the system? Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, members. Moving on then to agenda item number 10, which is the internal audit follow-up of contract management. Is this Lisa Lovegrove? Too many Lisas here, you know.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is touches on similar themes to what we've already discussed, but this is a follow-up of the contract management audit that was first presented to committee in January 2020. It was given a low assurance. Then in July 2020, Corporate Governance and Audit Committee recognised that the action plan contained some actions which were no longer feasible because they were reliant on the corporate support service review to deliver, and that had been halted due to COVID-19. So there was a revised action plan, and that was presented to this committee in January 2021. And so more of a robust action plan. A lot of the actions remain the same, but they reassigned the actions to officers within services to deliver rather than the corporate service support services review. So the first follow-up was presented in July 2021, given a low assurance. And just to sort of note that the low assurance is based on the progress in implementing the action plan. We don't retest the whole contract management aspect, which is just focusing on how much of the actions have been implemented. So this is our second follow-up, and as per the revised action plan, Maeve, who's on the line, did the follow-up. So I'll hand over to her to give a quick summary of what she found.
Okay, thank you. So this is the second follow-up, following the first follow-up in July. And although this remains a low assurance opinion, there has been significant progress made in a number of key areas. I think first and foremost is the approval of dedicated contract management resource. That was sort of a key thing, and I think Lisa touched on earlier the sort of allocation of responsibility for contract management. So this is certainly progress in the approval of that dedicated resource. The contract management forum has been established also, and that's got service-wide representation. So a member of each service will attend the contract management forum. It's held its first meeting earlier this month. The contract management framework has been approved by SLT, but not yet rolled out to services. So the forum has also set up its forward work programme to identify and assess additional training needs, because those will vary across services, as you would expect. So procurement and contract management training for sort of adult and children's services will differ from property, as you would expect. So whilst there has been notable progress made in a number of key areas, the assurance opinion remains low, primarily because there remains a number of outstanding actions from the original action plan. And these really are linked to the implementation and embedding of the contract management framework, which we talked about at the initial follow-up in July. And these are really about embedding and implementing the key tenets of the contract management framework. It's probably worth stressing at this stage that in the first follow-up, we had some revised action dates, which were potentially quite challenging and ambitious, not least because the procurement team was and continues to experience capacity pressures, and those have increased or been exacerbated since the first follow-up. And I think what the contract management forum intends to do is to rigorously test the framework that's been approved before it's rolled out to services, to make sure that it's fit for purpose, it does what it's supposed to do, and test that, particularly around contract risk evaluation and the scoring, which then has a knock-on impact on the tasks that are set up on Proactis. So as I say, there's still a number of actions outstanding, which is why this remains a low assurance. And some of those actions also relate to the training on the contract management forum and best practice. And that realistically is going to be an ongoing and iterative process. But I think the first and most important step is to roll out the contract management framework to services, and that will be a big first step in being able to consider providing greater assurance. So the momentum has already begun on the framework and the contract risk evaluation, but really training on the application of the framework needs to begin over the next coming weeks and months. So there, as we mentioned when we were discussing the previous audit report, there are a lot of synergies between the actions in contract management follow-up and the previous audit. So there are actions in train, but I think there's some merit in not sort of pushing those through without being rigorously tested in terms of the contract management framework. So I shall pause there and take any questions.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone may have.
Is there any questions, members? No? No? Okay, well, we'll move on to the recommendation. And recommendations are that the committee reviews progress with addressing the audit actions and decides whether it requires any further update reports on progress with the improvement action plan. Members? I'm in your hands.
Can I suggest, Chair, you'll definitely need a follow-up report on this because it's low assurance, as well as just the issue would be the timing, and I would be looking to Lisa for that. But looking at the dates for some of the actions and the fact that there are recruitments ongoing in respect to that. So just in the procurement team, we've recruited a systems officer who we hope will be in place by January. We are still without a procurement manager. We've had 4 recruitments that have failed to get us over the line with that. And I know that in Steve's service, there's a contract management officer, a post that's currently out for advert, closes at the end of this month. So it's, I'm guessing that it's a similar sort of timescale to the follow-up that was being proposed by Lisa in respect of the exemptions and exemptions report. I don't know, it's obviously that's for audit to say.
Oh, thanks, Gary. I see Steve Gadd's got his hand up. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I didn't think we'd actually decided where that post was going to sit, Gary, but there you go. It has gone out to advert, and we've had some interest. Just to be clear, that post won't be responsible for the contract management in the council. That post will be to help coordinate the working group, and it has a number of other roles as well. So it is an additional resource, but it's not. Its role is not to do all the contract management in the council. That just needs to be made clear, really, because I thought earlier on you might have been misunderstood as to what that role was.
Thanks, Steve. Gary?
I was just to say yes. Sorry. The role being advertised by an officer in Steve's service, not where it definitely sits. And the second bit, yes, it's not to do all contract management. Again, it's a support role to be able to support services to do their own contract management.
So I think it's clear, members, that due to it being a law, we should have a follow-up report, obviously with time restraints. So if Lisa can, put it down that the group, whether we're here or not, would like a follow-up report as soon as possible.
Yeah,
Sorry, Lisa.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've put on the report there on page 12 or page 378 of your packs. Our proposed date for next follow-up is June 2022, which is the same as the exceptions and exemptions report that we just discussed. I think there's merit in looking at the 2 areas together. Involves a lot of the same officers and similar issues, so being raised.
I think that makes sense, Lisa, bringing the 2 together. Paul, you just wanted to add something?
I'm just agreeing with what Lisa said. It was a thumb rather than a hand.
All right, mate. Right. Okay, then, members.
Mr. Chairman, I agree again. So surely these are very similar issues, So it makes sense to bring them together at that time. So I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Moving on then, members, to agenda item number 11, and that's progress review of the North Wales Growth Deal, North Wales Economic Ambition Board, pages 361 to 380. To receive for information a report Ordis Wales progress review of the North Wales Growth Deal, North Wales Economic Board. Is it Dave or Matthew?
That would be me again.
Oh, Dave.
I'll be brief. This is another positive report. Members will recall meetings within the council where the council was asked to support the growth deal. This support was sought and received earlier this year. In the review, we've examined the progress that partners have made to prepare for delivery of the growth deal. In doing this, we've looked at the Portfolio Management Office, the support that Gwynedd Council provides to the process, the various boards and the groups that are set up to support this. The report's quite descriptive, and it's deliberately descriptive because this is quite a complex area, and we wanted to be able to describe how the process worked, bringing the 6 councils together and working with the private sector as it's required to do with this. We comment positively on the progress that's been made, but we do recognise that some of the elements at that particular time were very much still work in progress. So there was still work to be done there, but we didn't have any concerns about the operation of it. The Portfolio Management Office has put together quite a detailed management response, and this is attached in your papers, so you can see how the recommendations that we made, our proposals for improvement at the time were made, and you can see how the Portfolio Management Office and partners are responding to the report. So I didn't propose to say much more. It is for information, but I am quite happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dave. I'm pleased that you're happy with this, because I had reservations, first of all, probably a year ago. So I'm pleased that things are coming together with this board. Any questions, members? Are you happy to receive the report? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. The recommendation there is that the corporate government notes the report and the management responses. Moving on then to agenda item number 12, which is Audit Wales work plan and timetable, page 381 to 394, to receive a report on Audit Wales work plan and timetable. Is that you again, Dave?
Well, I think Matt's going to start off because the first section is financial audits, and then I'll pick up on the rest of the report. If that's okay.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Chair. Just briefly, the document updates you really on the status of our planned work that was set out in our audit plan, which I think you considered back in March. Just a couple of items to update you on in terms of the financial audit work on page 401. Obviously, the first item there we've considered today, so you're aware of the position with that. Steve talked about earlier about the impact on his team in terms of the ongoing work and still auditing in the autumn, and that is going to impact on the second item in the schedule there on page 401, which is around our other key area of work around the certification of the council's grants, claims and returns. We're confident most of the deadlines will be met. The only one just to flag with you is the non-domestic rates return that we certify on behalf of Welsh Government. You can see the deadline for that was the 19th of November. Unfortunately, we're not going to meet that. You're not alone. I don't think any council in Wales is likely to meet that deadline or has met that deadline, but we're prioritising that over the others, and Welsh Government are aware of the position. I don't think there are any implications for the authority in delaying that. And we'll report back the outcome of that work to a meeting in the spring of 22. I'll pass back to Dave to cover the performance element, Chair, but happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, so within the report, we comment on the performance audit work for 2020-21, and also the performance audit work for 21-22. I think it's positive to note that we are on track to complete our external audit work in Denbighshire by the end of March. We may stray after that with some of the reports, but the work is all in place and it's all taking place. The summary includes the local government national studies work that's been undertaken, the value for money studies. It includes commentaries from Estin and the Care Inspectorate Wales, so you can see what some of the other inspectorates are doing. We've got a section there on the Audit Wales national reports and other outputs that are provided. And then there's some information there about forthcoming good practice exchange events and publications. So this is the second one of these reports that we've provided. I suppose in a way it complements Lisa's internal audit update. So this is so that the audit committee can see the progress that we're making in delivering the external audit. So I'm happy to take any questions, although I do have to caveat that slightly by saying it is a report that covers all our work. So I'll answer what I can, but if there are any questions that I'm not able to answer or Matt's not able to answer, then we'll get the answer for you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Matt. Members, have you any questions? It's self-explanatory, the report. There's a lot of work in there, I know that. No questions, members? Okay, moving on to recommendation that the committee confirms that it has read, understood and taken account of the work plan and timetable and has the opportunity to ask for any points of clarification. I think it's self-explanatory. As I say, there is a lot of work going forward. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Matthew. Moving on to agenda item 13, it'll be the last one you'll be glad to hear, is the Governance and Audit Committee Work Programme 395 to 398 to consider committee's forward work programme. Lisa?
Yeah, there's a few to add. I think there was a Audit Wales review of cyber resilience, and committee previously requested an update from ICT on progress in addressing those recommendations, whether that needs to be scheduled in for January or March if there's capacity, and then March 2022, normally we bring the internal audit strategy for the year 22-23, that will be. And then April meeting, the annual governance statements, the draft, try and get that there then. And then June, just need to include the internal audit annual report. There's standard items that come at those time of year.
January's looking rather meaty, isn't it? I'm wondering if the first one you mentioned could be coming March rather than January.
Mm-hmm.
Any views, members?
Chair, I had another one to suggest for January, so which is the annual whistleblowing report, because it came last January. But if you wanted that to go to March, then I don't suppose much would be lost if it went to March. But I was going to suggest it goes on there. And then the other one I was going to suggest is that you also get an annual report on the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, sort of surveillance activity. That would be due again in June, because it came in June this year. And then there were follow-up reports, weren't there, that you were asking for in respect of the two issues you discussed today around exemptions and exceptions and the contract management report.
You okay, members, with that? Paul, you have a question?
Only to say, Chair, communication this end's not good. So if this is repetition, apologies. but bearing in mind what we just talked about, exceptions and exemptions and contract management, I made a note that we might expect something in March, April, a request from services, and then the internal audit follow-ups in July.
Sorry, yeah, Paul's correct. Sorry, the follow-ups in, I think it was June or July, I can't remember what Lisa said, but also Lisa Legal said that she'd be happy for us to bring a report on progress with uptake on Proactis in March or April. What I'd suggest is March, because April, that meeting is very close to the election, and it may be that that meeting might fall. Yeah.
Thank you, Gary. Steve?
Yeah, I probably needs to wait, but obviously the statement of accounts aren't on there, both draft and final. The treasury management reports aren't on there, so that those will need to be put in. And I just wondered whether you wanted a report on the budget. I came last April with the budget process, so it's where you'd want, I suppose, an update of how that process went in its first year and how it's going to go on in future years. Like, we usually come for information on the process at least once a year to the Governance and Audit Committee, so that would need to be factored in somewhere as well. Perhaps I'll take it offline with the committee admin to see where best to place them. But obviously, statement of accounts would normally be July, September. That might be worth waiting until the January report in case we and Wales Audit Office or Audit Wales make a decision that we're not going to commit to those earlier dates. So,
okay, cheers, Steve. Are members happy with that? Well, you're pleased to know it's the end of the meeting. I've got to get back to Rhyl, 40 miles away, for another meeting at 2:30. Mate, can I thank you all for your time today? Our friends from Audit Wales, Dave and Matthew, and Lisa, for all the hard work you do. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.